Wait, who the hell are you? It feels a bit odd putting out a personal favorite albums list as the first video on a channel, least of all because you don't know me. Why would you care? And that's valid. You're valid. You're special. But I wanted to do this for two reasons. Firstly, I was already planning on pulling this list together for myself, and I wanted to do something with it before the appropriate window had completely passed me by. Let me have this, okay? I meant to finish this a couple of weeks ago. But secondly, perhaps this will be a nice way to set the groundwork. Say, hey, hi, I'm Clove Green, this is what I'm into, this is what I'm like, this is what I do. Maybe you'll stick around if this goes anywhere. It's nice to meet you. Grab a chair, let's get to know each other, have a drink. Relax. So yeah, my top 150 albums of 2025. I listen to a lot of music as it stands, but to do a list like this properly, I spent all of January consulting other polls and lists, doing some good research to fill some gaps for myself, and boy, there were a lot of gaps, and then spent all of February writing it up. Now, obviously this is a question of taste, and when I try to be fair and as objective as one little guy can be, that does play into this. The music I like is pretty varied, and why I like it can be for grossly different reasons. Everything I love about lush, roomy synth-pop is completely absent in sparse, grating, experimental sound collage. I love incisive rap lyricism, but that doesn't mean I'm automatically switching off a 4-hour wordless ambient project either. By and large, if an album is doing what I think it's trying to do, and I like what it's trying to do, it'll probably score some brownie points with me.
No, it's nice. It's so nice. Oh, I've never...
Now, I just want to say, I actually pulled together a top 300, but this video was taking too long to write and it would have been absolutely monstrous to sit through. So, links to the full list will be on my album of the year and Rate Your Music pages. Go follow me. And of course, even with hindsight and a month of targeted listening, I can't hear everything. So if something's not on the list and you think it should have been, by all means, drop it in the comments. I'm always looking for more sound to bung in my ear holes.
I'm begging you.
Now, it's worth stating my eligibility criteria here. At 150, some bold and virtuosic canción ligera with a jazzy twist from Chile's Mon Laferte with a strong vocal performance and uncompromising lyrical style in Femme Fatale. Meanwhile, at 149, Joey Valence and Bray follow up their 2024 breakthrough No Hands with a more party-oriented iteration of their hip-hop sound without sacrificing heart or personality on Hyperyouth. At 148, Chinese improvisational instrumental quartet The River Orchestration Walkman combine classical, jazz, sound collage, and post-rock into a meandering atmospheric suite on Eternal Summer. And then at 147, American producer Royalty One A Tricks Point Never delivers his second best record of the year. This score to Mighty Supreme Will Always Have My Heart with the sprawling soundscapes of Tranquilizer. Slot 146 sees Mabe Frati and Hector Tosta's Titanic collaboration return for its second album, an eclectic art pop meets jazz rock record with gutsy guitars and solid strings on Hagen. And then at 145, the floppy-haired simp from Stranger That Know, Let Me Behave, Joe Keery, delivers his strongest set of material to date with the retro-sheened one-two punch of 70s piano and guitar indie pop and 90s psyche space rock on Joe's The Crux Deluxe. 144 brings a short but earwormy melding of Dean Blunt and Elias Runenfeld, whose dream pop and indie rock sensibilities are backed up with production contributions from Vegan concentrated in the 7 untitled but numbered tracks of Lucre. At 143 comes the newest from Perfume Genius, who jumps fully into the folksy side of art pop on the cathartic, open-hearted Glory, while at 142 comes the deceptively titled The Velvet Underground and Rowan, in fact a charmingly dynamic off-kilter bedroom pop collaboration between twee pop newcomers World Peace DMT and Rowan Please from the Femcells. Brazil's Marina Sena is at 141 with Coisas Naturais, her strongest album to date, and a pitch-perfect fusion of alternative R&B, Latin pop, and MPB, while at 140, vocal jazz's current First Lady Cécile McLaurin-Salvant self-produces an unexpected and compositionally eccentric set of songs that pushes her diverse and imaginative style further into allegory and personal storytelling on Oh Snap! At 139, NMIX deliver a masterclass on Blue Valentine that channels all the immediacy and pop songcraft of the best second-gen K-pop into an imaginative and catchy package that allows for shades of fifth-gen invention and experimentation. Number 138 belongs to Machine Girl with the manic industrial heaviness of their synthy stimulating digi-hardcore on Psycho Warrior MG Ultra X, while at 137 the Pride of Tyneside, Sam Fender's Mercury winner, is enriched by a second helping of the same social realism and conscious British heartland rock on People Watching's deluxe edition. Another drifting, exploratory Chinese instrumental album at 136 as Indefinite wend their way through 80 engrossing minutes of layered, echoing post-rock on Tiger, while not a million miles away at 135, the Québécois collective Lumicmag drops an octet of moody, explorative jazz and avant-folk in Ce qui tombe dans l'air.
Merci beaucoup. Je oui, oui, baguette. Bisous.
At 134, one of the great figures in West Africa's musical landscape, the Mauritanian griot Noura Mintse Mali returns after almost a decade out of the studio with her fusion of traditionally inspired song and psychedelic Tishomaran experimentation on Yenbet. Belgian accordionist Suzanne Peters is at 133 with Casotto, an ambient album with a simple concept exploring every potential sound she can draw from the accordion while pairing it strikingly with fluttering electronics. Meanwhile, at 132, oddball Britpop cult favourite Lawrence Hayward of Denim fame returns to a 2005 demo away from the hazes of addiction and personal difficulty, refreshing and re-recording it into a portfolio of his off-kilter charm and tower block on a jam jar. 131 brings us Smurs' stripped-back reflection on urban existence with the smooth and sensual synth-pop of Big City Life, and at 130 comes a fearless and fascinating compilation of dark ambient, industrial and sampledelia built around themes of inheritance, memory and collective power, with the striking Only Sounds That Tremble Through Us. Dave proves why he is one of the UK hip-hop's foremost creative talents at 129 with the sensitive, biblically themed personal epic of The Boy Who Played the Harp, while at 128 indie favourite Sharon Van Etten gets her new wave on with the atmospheric, anthemic profundity of Sharon Van Etten and the Attachment Theory. Spanish-language prog folk at 127 from Mexico's Cesare Sujardin, whose blend of chamber pop and Latin jazz elevates strong and emotive songwriting on Corre y Suelta los Perros, and at 126 abstract indie-tronic post-bedroom pop with a contemplative, always evolving tone from New York composer and singer-songwriter Oh Young with You Are Always on My Mind. 125 brings us the latest from the great Lonnie Holley, whose deeply personal, often starkly affronting narratives and bluesy spiritual soul is packed with passion and poetry on Tonki. Latin drumless with lush production that channels dreamy ambient-influenced prog, one of the year's most creative blends of genres, can be found on Alcoy's massively underheard hip-hop opus Vale Chacalqui at 124, while at 123 Matt Berninger grows his opus away from the National with his second solo record Get Sunk, a pared-back but still playful rendition of his dry and discursive songwriting. 122 sees American trumpeter Ambrose Akinmusire bringing weighty, expansive avant jazz rap to the fore in the adventurous yet surprisingly approachable Honey from a Winter Stone, while at 121, Windmill Scene Satellite and Yorgos Lanthimos' current composer of choice, Jurgen Fendrix reflects on the chaos and pain of death and nostalgia through eccentric cinematic art pop on Once Upon a Time in Shropshire.
We quite like it. You may too.
At 120, Horse Girl, the slacker rock trio, not the Berlin-based pony-masked producer, bring Kate Laban on board to produce their second record, updating their sound into a simple but not simplistic iteration of honest, quirky yet accessible guitar music on Phonetics On and On. Lily Allen is at 119 with perhaps the most scathing infidelity album since Lemonade, distilling personal grievance into ruthless lyrical confessions and condemnations, and coming out proud, petty, and oh so brilliantly pop on West End Girl. At 118, we find Tyler, the Creator, stepping back from the big, high-concept, often very personal opuses of his recent discography for a committed slice of pure party vibes on Don't Tap the Glass, while at 117, Australia's insanely named psychedelic porn crumpets land with their second of two 2025 albums in the fun, noisy, space psych garage rock of Pogo Rodeo. At 116, the ever-prolific Nate Amos and Rachel Brown of Water From Your Eyes. I called them something different in the audio, and I don't know why. That's what they're called. Okay. Thank you. Pull their noisy post-punk art pop in a deadpan direction that is at once head-boppingly groovy and yet gleefully unstable, with the wry and mercurial It's a Beautiful Place. At 115, we find the self-titled release from brother and sister outfit Los Tutanaka, peddling their bracing brand of traditional South American folk music and pounding electronica. Meanwhile, at 114, Toronto's Rochelle Jordan plunders deep house and UK garage in her own danceable brand of R&B, reaching new heights on her third album, Through the Wall. At 113, prolific Quebecois artist Coffre de Bijou blends digipop, hard rock, gothic slowcore and more into a singular and gripping take on black gaze and the atmospheric Kunai Kunijutse. And for the 112 spot, Beijing-based but Western Chinese-inspired noise folk outfit IZ deliver a live session album of remarkable energy, craft, and impact on memory. At 111, we get the long-awaited studio debut of gospel-drenched soul from a now classic family band, with Annie Caldwell and co shining the light on Can't Lose My Soul. And for 110, we find the solo debut from Maria Zardoya of the Marias, vulnerable and intimate in the down-tempo dreamy sophistopop of Melt. Latvian new age ethnopop girl group Taltumetas, most famous from their breathtaking 2025 Eurovision entry Porman Laibi, give us a 10-track project full of radiant, rhythmic folk pop pinnacled by majestic close harmony vocal arrangements on Zemsalis Under the Solar Spell at 109. Meanwhile, at 108, Suede, aka the London Suede if you're in America, continue to prove how they remain one of the most consistently solid bands of their generation with the anxious, scrappy glam rock and post-Britpop of antidepressants. At 107, Spelling pushes forward from the baroque dark wave of her previous albums to lean into a more muscular, guitar-driven sound that doesn't lose the core of her captivating songcraft or aesthetic in the intricate art rock of Portrait of My Heart. And at 106, we find Red Veil's Sankofa, a soulful, conscious jazz hop record that feels like the most promising and passionate set of work from the American rapper-producer to date. Kea lands at slot 105 with an ambitious album fusing constantly shifting electrified R&B and progressive jazz soul into a heady but remarkably cohesive mix on Hook's Law. At 104, meanwhile, we find The End from Junior Brother, an uncompromising and sometimes grating but frequently transcendent interpretation of Irish avant folk that proves both alienating and arresting upon continued deeper listening. London saxophonist Venna joins forces with a host of great musicians including Georgia Smith, Yusuf Days, Mike and Leon Thomas for a stunningly chill, perfectly paced jazz fusion record in Malik at 103, while at 102, Archduke of Americana Jason Isbell pulls apart the end of one long relationship and the start of a new one in Foxes in the Snow, with all of his roots music know-how and insightful songwriting present as ever on this solo showcase. And then, at 101, comes the second self-titled LP from London post-rock band Caroline, building on their sentimental and sprawling style to create a record of genuinely moving power on Caroline 2.
Hey, who are you guys?
We am, is, are, and be they whom as are known as the Electric Mayhem.
I'm a level with you. I'm perhaps not quite as in love with Mayhem as other internet gays have proven to be. I don't think it's Gaga's best album as it happens, though what I would crown instead tends to change by the hour. But all of that said, it's difficult to deny the pop precision and performance craft on show on Lady Gaga's 8th, or 9th, or 7th album, depends on how you count it all. It does feel like a synthesis of parts of Gaga's whole career, combining the pop sensibility of The Fame, the aesthetics of Born This Way, the avant-garde eclecticism of art pop, and the futurism of Chromatica. And she manages somehow to find a path through it all to make a record that displays its past influences clearly, without feeling dated or passé. And what a voice, man. Gaga's time exploring jazz, show tune, and the American songbook has allowed Mayhem to capitalize on a versatile yet consistently strong vocal presence that the varied song compositions and productions can exploit and pull in different directions. It's pretty great stuff.
Mama, are you gonna be a lesbian tonight?
不会说英文。
Lies.
An incredibly underrated deep cut here, which I found by chance while scrolling Album of the Year's new releases for the day. For the Courtesan Ching Lin is the kind of cool concept album that maximizes the potential of a precise raison d'etre. Kind of like with the Suzanne Peters album earlier in the list, O'Meal takes a single source of musical material and explores the potential of using it diversely and pervasively in constructing a sound world. However, while Peters was using the accordion as the basis of an exploration in the ambient and drone space, for the Courtesan Ching Lin pastes together samples of Chinese classical music in looping, accumulating combinations to construct a collaged setting for a poetic sapphic love letter. Don't let the potential culture barrier put you off from searching this thing out. It's a real beauty.
I am black. I am gay. I am disabled. I am a woman. I am
A rageful, profane scream to the heavens here. The title of Motherfucker, I Am Both Amen and Hallelujah gives you a clue into the spirit and energy of this whole project, but it really takes listening to the whole thing from front to back to understand the lengths and depths that Alex Kent and co. are diving into here. Formed from the splinters of the abrupt disbanding of experimental rock quartet Sprain, Kent and bandmate Sylvie Simmons found 3 new collaborators to start expanding upon leftovers from the old band and ended up with a single hour-long song that excoriates and desecrates, rants and raves, pulling together sexual and biblical imagery before mashing it together and funneling it through strident guitars and interference. It's a heavy, draining, quite difficult listen all around, and that's before you even consider if the lyrical heathenism on show may genuinely offend you, but it's an absolutely one-of-a-kind experience. No, this isn't melodrama. She's already made melodrama. We don't need melodrama 2 Electric Boogaloo, and honestly, I'm all the more glad for it. Lorde is one of the most interesting of whatever nebulous group might be seen as the alt-pop girlies, least of all because she remains among the youngest of her generation of stars, and that aspect of things, just how goddamn young she was when she started out, is part of the tense, problematized introspection that carries much of the lyrical content of Virgin. This is a tough read at times, a raw and exposing look at Lorde as both an artist and a young woman, and while the Jimmy Stack-helmed production pulls her back towards dancier pop beats than anything on Solar Power, many of that album's themes of solitude, the disdain of fame, the critical view of the public eye, hell, even the escapism and occasional out-of-body surrealism all seem to return here. After Lorde's return to the musical forefront on the Girl So Confusing remix, it all crystallizes into a remarkably nuanced listen.
Look how thin I am. Thin and dainty. I don't look a day over 2,000. Moisturize me, moisturize me.
Living in the UK and consuming British musical media as I do, there are a few bands that just seem to always show up, land strong, get critical love, and then remain in the conversation to the bemusement of, well, usually bigots, idiots, and chauvinists, but still. There are a few on the full list, really, but one of the most emblematic of these groups is Wet Leg, the 2021-founded, women-fronted indie rock 5-piece from the Isle of Wight. How tasty, then, that their second album shows up and proves even wittier, even sexier, even catchier than the last. Written as a full 5-piece after taking on their touring band as fully fledged members, it's a testament to their chemistry as a unit, both amongst themselves and with returning producer Dan Carey. Oh, how we love Dan Carey. That Moisturizer has such a secure flow to it as a record proves so tight and gratifying, while allowing for a naturalistic kind of looseness to it that helps enrich the album's more sentimental side. But fundamentally, it's just a good time, off-kilter and unexpected in all the right ways.
Excuse me, miss. What seems to be the problem here?
The problem?
Yes.
Everything is a problem. Everything in this hotel is a problem.
Not the last album in this top 100, I'll be refraining from saying the title of, mind you, but DNWLP, let's go with that. DNWLP is an apparent follow-up to Stickerbush and Heaven Soul's last collaboration as the side pieces, LNWDP from 2024. And I'll be honest, I didn't know about that album, I didn't listen to it in 2024, and upon going back to listen recently, I kind of see why. It's fine, it's alright, it has some reminiscences of SoundCloud and YouTube rap from the late 2000s and early 2010s, and a couple of highlights, but it didn't grab me. The follow-up, on the other hand, is a real blisterer, a huge and ambitious glitch-hop collage that pushes any aesthetic sensibilities to their extremes. It might prove a little much for a fair few listeners, but so will the Shearling record, and I'm recommending that just as heartily. It's one of the most extraordinary listening experiences I've had in a long while, just being picked up by sounds that I can't figure out and carried along this pyroclastic flow of glitchy, hyper-processed beats, overblown sampletronica, some truly insane lyrical moments, and almost recognizable songcraft that is cut up and reformatted into some kind of psychedelic sonic Rubik's Cube. Very good.
I just never knew how to put the words to it. You sexual. E-U-S-E-X.
Yep, I'm including both of them here. Even though Eusexual overall is probably the stronger of the two individual albums, I think you get the most interesting and enriching listening experience with them both combined. Twigs is another of the big it girls of the alt-pop scene at the moment, and after 2022's Capra songs came and went with honestly not enough fanfare, it's nice to see her getting both critical and public attention and some awards recognition to boot. Like another record of the year, Tame Impala's Deadbeat, but honestly, I think more successfully, Eusexual takes the costumes and sounds of dance and rave culture and warps it through an anxious, individualistic lens that only morphs further into a blissed-out, cybernetized mirror image on the sequel album. For all its vision and imagination, though, it's restrained and focused in the ways that count, creating a consistent sound world and impeccable track listing and some surprisingly judicious features. Yeah, even Northwest. Man, is being a Quedeca fan paying dividends as of late. The guy's always been something of a curio since starting out as a YouTube rapper, but each time a new project comes out, we seem to find a new frontier that his artistry is effortlessly forging a path towards and indeed past. And while nothing on Vanisher quite scratches the same itch that my favorite corners of the Scrapyard EPs or even I Didn't Mean to Haunt You did for me, what we do get on here is a broadening of Quedeca's handling of narrative concept, an enriching of production, and even greater genre diversity than ever before. Like the Eusexia albums beforehand, this reminds me of another project from the year that I liked but maybe didn't love. In this case, the Mountain Goats is Through the Fire across from Peter Balkan. Both concept albums about sailors on ill-fated voyages, Peter Balkan struggles from a general steadiness in its stylistic ambitions, no matter how accomplished and entertaining as songwriter John Darnielle can be. Vanisher, meanwhile, is perhaps a little overfull with ideas, but it takes the endless horizon that its protagonist is venturing towards, the breadth and mystery of the sea, as an invitation to widen scope, change up the status quo, experiment, and even if the narrative proves a little bit more elusive and psychological, it makes for a more thrilling, more captivating story to be in the audience for.
Thank you all. Your love has broken the curse and freed my soul. I'll never have to kill again. Really?
Sometimes, a healthy dose of soulful trad pop is what we need, and by God, if Olivia Dean doesn't know how to deliver it. You've probably heard Man I Need by now, a fine addition to my favorite subgroup of tracks, the 12/8 mid-tempo shuffle beat pop perfection songbook, but there isn't a dud number here, not even a dud bar. And while it perhaps might play things stylistically safe, I'd love to see maybe some more psychedelic or jazzier influences going forward. Everything it does do is absolutely top-notch, perfectly, radiantly but not overly produced, with snappy and memorable sophistopop songwriting and a rich vocal performance to cap it off. The 2020s British pop soul boom is continuing apace at the moment, and with albums like this leading the charge, it's no wonder it's doing as well as it is. Colombia's Lucrecia Dalt has been a consistently fascinating creative voice over the past couple of decades, dark and eerie in her compositions, surreal and sensual in her lyricism. A Danger to Ourselves isn't a dramatic departure for Dalt, but with David Sylvian, frontman of the incredibly influential new wave individualists Japan, taking co-production for this album, she finds a slightly more pop-leaning outlet for her stylistic preferences. It helps to enliven this newest album, too, that the lyrical content is decidedly more immediate and microcosmic here, less universal abstractions and more interpersonal interactions, less cosmic horror, more day-to-day depravity. Fusing shades of Latin canciones and lumbering dark jazz into the fabric of the album, Dalt pushes her work in a new and energized direction, opening herself to more standard songcraft without losing her unique atmospheric touch.
You must never stop practicing the art of ninja, the art of invisibility.
Oh, but no anchovies. And I mean no anchovies. You put anchovies on this thing and you're in big trouble, okay?
Kate LeBon is an artist I came to embarrassingly late, only truly diving into her wonderful back catalogue with any real intrigue upon the release of 2023's enthralling Pompeii. The Welsh singer-songwriter and producer has an immediately recognizable style, psychedelic, slick and shimmering, where distortion and detuning add a charming strangeness to measured and often declamatory statements of song. If Pompeii was by and large a catchier album to my ears, Michelangelo Dying is more obtuse, with more drawn-out meandering phrases and insistent but never urgent repetition forming the backbone of the song structures here. And it's wonderful, a perfect tonal match to LeBon's exhaustion and contemplation during and after a period of devastating heartbreak that nonetheless never allows itself to get bogged down in undue dirgery. An expectedly but still marvelously stunning listen.
Earth or something? Spell it. E-A-R-T-H.
An early highlight of 2025 that I honestly feel was just buried a tad by the time the year ends came around, Anna B. Savage's radiant chamberfolk on You and I Are Earth is maybe a slightly simpler affair than the English-born, Dublin-based musician's first two records, but the Nick Drake-esque arrangements here serve the more open emotionality of her reflections, both on love between people and love of a place. With John Spud Murphy behind the desk, who, amongst other recent highlights, has also produced Irish avant folk stars Lankum, as well as Junior Brothers' record from higher up the list, and Irish musicians accompanying her circumspect lyrics, the connection to her current homeland runs through the music on multiple levels. Meanwhile, her frequent muse of the natural world is transformed here from a mysterious stranger to a welcoming and comforting friend. Beautiful, down-to-earth singer-songwriter fare that is at once intimate and expansive, simple in its sincerity.
Enter the world of Di Serono.
This is not your Nana's Bar Italia. The London guitar-based three-piece cut their teeth with a mix of cloudy, cool, and slow-burning slacker rock best exemplified by their 2023 major label debut Tracy Denham. But Some Like It Hot, despite coming only 2 years and 2 albums later, feels like a marked jump for the band in pushing something more concertedly catchy. It almost passes for Britpop at points, really, at the least something descended from it, but it doesn't discard the familiar Bar Italia murk, the fuzzily mixed guitars, or the charmingly imprecise vocal deliveries, despite the overall cleaner and more expansive sound. When things do get more nebulous, it's to a dreamy rather than dirge-like end, giving the album an ebb and flow to it that it needs. It's a solid evolution for a group who are quickly proving to be essential players in the British indie scene, and a great place to jump on if you're not already on board.
See, the rain is nice, but I don't really like getting wet.
Something's in the Water in Veracruz. This is not the first stunning folk-flooded album from the Mexican state on this list, nor will it be the last. Silvana Estrada's second solo studio album was meant to be different, less somber, less introspective, less mellow, but an accumulation of personal tragedies necessitated a development rather than a diversion from the emotional chamberfolk of 2022's Marchita. But despite the profound sadness that informs the album, including the murder of a close friend, Estrada channels the emotion through her poetry into beauty and at times even vivacity that seems almost defiant. And that's to say nothing of her immaculate vocals or the soothing, sentimental instrumental arrangements that underpin the songs here. Just a beautiful, warm, inviting, sensitive listen all around.
Is your lawn spongy, soft, squishy?
Touch me.
Norwegian noise punk with a relentless energy behind it and some of the year's driest, drollest lyrics. Thank you from my non-existent Norwegian to the legend that translated this whole album on Genius.com. Softspot has proven to be something of a minor breakthrough for Kristiansand's Honningbarna, revitalizing the attention afforded them as they neared the 15-year mark. Yeah, in corners it's a little bit edgy in a way that maybe dampened my enjoyment of the record a tiny bit, but it has a sincerity, a self-effacing quality to it that leaves it coming out on the side of charmingly brusque rather than needlessly contrarian. There's an anger fomenting in the belly of the record that finds itself let out not just in Edvard Valberg's vocal performance, but in the punchy energy of the instrumental performances too. The mix pushed almost to the point of clipping, the overall unsettled nature that pushes the listening experience to the edge of the seat. Great stuff.
Bitch, I'm a cow. Bitch, I'm a cow. Bitch, I'm a cow. Bitch, I'm a cow. Go me.
No one's charting a course in music quite like Doja Cat, and with V she proves once again that she knows how to pull together a mean pop record. Really, this feels like something of a companion to Scarlet. While that record sought rather successfully, in my opinion, to stake Doja's claim as a serious rap force, V reinforces her pop credibility and creativity in turn. The flavors are unmistakably 70s and 80s in both direct references and general atmosphere, and with a production team including the likes of Jack Antonoff alongside returning collaborator Curtis McKenzie and even George Daniel on a track, it's a seamless stylistic blend of past Doja-isms with the breadth of both contemporary and retro radio pop, without sacrificing the wit and personality that always makes Doja a great time to listen to. At its worst, it's a bunch of good songs. At its best, it's plainly some of the grooviest numbers of the year. Honestly, surprised at how underloved this felt to me last year. If anything, it only shows that Doja's creativity and artistic voice is strengthening from release to release.
This is not your sky. This is my sky. My sky!
I feel like an introduction is probably due here. Leanne Bedasamasake Simpson is a Mississauga Anishinaabe musician and academic and one of the most important and prominent Indigenous activist creatives working in Canada today. Taking inspiration from the lived experience of modern-day First Nations people, the grassroots community movements that she supports, and land-based political and philosophical models, her work spans both the written and the musical. Live Like the Sky is her latest collection of considered, interrogative, moving indie pop, drawing from the formative musical influences that surrounded her as a child growing up in Ontario through the 70s, 80s, and 90s. The new wave, the alt-pop, the goth, and the punk. It forms a rich and nostalgic backdrop to deeply felt lyrics that take in the modern world with both clarity and poetic rage. Environmentalism, fascism, war, peace, and a sense of being underpin the songwriting here and make for a thought-provoking and very substantive listen. The second son of now iconic collective Odd Future, Earl Sweatshirt has had a pretty perfect run of albums stretching all the way back to 2013's Doris, but every record since has proven a justification of his place in contemporary hip-hop. Coming 2 years after Voir Dire, a pretty transformative record for both Earl and collaborating producer The Alchemist, Live, Laugh, Love, okay, Wine Mom, gives us a svelte 25 minutes of, well, actually quite a chill, positive project, especially by Earl's standards. It's an album that pairs a fluid and unpredictable flow with some tongue-in-cheek wit, dents, and layered lyricism and imaginative sample-heavy production from the likes of Theravada and Navy Blue that all distills into a catalogue of genuine joy, security, and positivity that proves an enlivening listen. told me a few years ago that Addison Rae would be one of pop music's princesses in 2025, I probably would have laughed. And can you blame me? Even if her earliest work was leaked, it maybe wasn't the best foot forward. But Addison went away, put in the work, got the Charlie XCX stamp of approval, and found some pitch-perfect collaborators in the form of Elvira Anderfjord and Luca Closer, and now we have one of the best pop albums of the decade on our hands, and I really stand by that. Not only is it leagues apart from the AR EP, but it's providing a fresh take on 90s trip-hop and dance pop without losing the slightly intense confessional slant of her earlier work. It's a reinvention that manages to come away without feeling inauthentic. Addison and her collaborators know where they want to push their dozy, dreamy retropop, sometimes into actually quite progressive corners, and it makes for a dramatic and exciting re-debut for an artist to definitely follow going forward.
Country boy, I love you.
It's crazy to think that this is a major label debut from Alex G. Particularly in online music circles, the guy has felt almost omnipresent, certainly over the past half a decade, with some great albums under his belt and 2 fantastic Jane Schoenbrunn soundtracks to boot. Schoenbrunn soundtracks. But with the jump to major label comes a slickening of the lo-fi indie foundations that grew his quite sizable fan base, and while some of them may feel slightly put out by the more spacious and polished productions, the shift is more of a shuffle to the side than a long jump. Headlights has plenty of the sort of indie folk to be found on, for example, 2022's God Save the Animals, even if here he's skewing more concertedly Americana. He's put on his double denim and his best Stetson just for us. And the results show John Ascoli's versatility, his mainstream appeal, and his idiosyncrasy all at once. Warm and picturesque and catchy too.
No, I'm a star! Please, I'm a star!
Jade Thirlwall's artistic journey since the dissolution of Little Mix has been a patient one. The last of the group's members to release a solo single, it's not controversial to say that her rise to bona fide solo star has been the brightest and most prominent. And upon listening to That's Showbiz Baby, it's not hard to see that the time that elapsed in preparation for her return was well spent. Jade eschews the potential comfort of safe, easily boxable pop that would have been readily available to her, and goes for something more daring, more artistically thorough, more musically complex. Angel of My Dreams is as art pop as anything any mainstream artist is putting out, with tempo and genre shifts, a demanding vocal part, and a thematically appropriate sample to build it atop, and that's just the lead single. There's not a second that goes by on this album, even on the deluxe, where something unexpected, innovative, or just plain satisfying isn't going on, and with a strong sense of songwriting and a wide-eyed approach to combining her influences, Jade's theatrical, conflicted take on living and performing in the public eye is one that only rewards repeat exploration. As I'm sure this list has already proven, I am something of an apologist for both hardline folk and what might be described as more peculiar interpretations of it. And champion piper Breeza Campbell somehow finds a secure dwelling place between them. You might know her from the bagpipe solo on Caroline Polachek's song Blood and Butter, by the way. Sunwise is a traditional pipe and song album, sure, but it's also something more exploratory, experimental, expansive. Really, it's rooting itself in minimalism, ambient, drone music, a natural fit when you consider the natural tendencies of the pipes, and Patience rewards a keen listener with a majestic set of tracks that recontextualizes and reimagines the sound of Highland folk music to stunning effect. From one of contemporary metal's most squeam-inducing band names comes a third full length of high-impact, high-energy, high-adrenaline metalcore. I remember Pupil Slicer right back from their self-titled debut EP in 2017, which was fine, really, but since the full lengths have been coming out, they've put nary a foot wrong, and Fleshwork retains the boiling, bash-you-over-the-head sound that the band have been honing. There are hints of other genres peeking in, the intricacies of mathcore, the chugging meteoricism of industrial, the blooming bottom end and intensity of sludge. But the atmosphere and soaring emotion of the best metalcore are front and center here. And God, does this thing sound brilliant. My favourite production of theirs, and handily some of the most precise and careful mixing in the genre this decade. The drums pop, the bass rumbles, the guitars clatter and clang, and the vocals weave through the chaos so precisely. Easily the band's most compelling work to date, and a real kick up the jacksie in the absolute best way.
Hi, I'm Renata Bliss, and I'm your freestyle dance teacher.
I remember absolutely falling in love with Natural Brown Prom Queen, Sudan Archive's 2022 breakout record. The Cincinnati-born Brittany Parks gave us a confident, sensual exploration of self-discovery through the vibrant blend of R&B, hip-hop beats, neo-soul, and artful post-pop. Now, 3 years later, that versatility and fusional vision return for the BPM, but with a major new headliner in the mix. This thing is a dance album, and shit does it rip. It's not IDM as it's typically understood, but this is nonetheless intelligent dance music, with everyday lyrical concerns elevated through the multifaceted, ever-shifting production, intensified by pounding drums, high-tempo synth pulses, snippets of orchestral textures, and the frenetic, sweaty energy of EDM and house. It can venture into some fairly serious topics, but the sheer euphoria of the music encourages movement as the most vital and fitting way to process it all.
I'm taking it. No. I really don't think you should take that. No. Oh. Have I just... There's no way. Have I just witnessed a crime?
After 2024's Clancy left us with a surprise cliffhanger, the true end to the decade-long Trench saga permeating 21 Pilots releases finally arrived with Breach in 2025. And honestly, it took a couple listens to fully appreciate what was going on here, even if singles like The Contract and Drum Show did immediately land for me. Breach, like any TOP record, is a difficult one to pin down stylistically, made all the more eclectic through the resurrection of a 12-year-old Indietronica demo, a reworking of another band's song, and some rather unhinged samples. There's an audio clip of a TikTok documenting a crowd member stealing a drum during the Clancy tour in one of these songs, but it's all intentional. This is the culmination of the concept arc that underpins the greater part of the band's discography and all of their mainstream success, and by engaging with their own fandom, returning to older material, continuing to broaden the stylistic scope of their work, and providing a narrative conclusion to the Clancy storyline, Breach functions not just as a good album, but as a solid yet sentimental postlude to the Columbus duo's current era. I'm specifying the digital remains release of this album for the inclusion of the stunning Drag Path. No, the newly released streaming version doesn't quite cut it. But even without it, this album is a great end to one of the most high-profile and high-concept cycles in contemporary pop.
Yo, Dave, your house is on fire.
Let it burn.
Your house is on fire.
Let it burn!
A bit like Wet Leg, really. The Last Dinner Party have suffered from industry plant allegations since their first single, 2023's smash Nothing Matters, and even a remarkable debut album couldn't assuage the haters. Women in rock being unfairly targeted by collective online discussion culture, who'd have thought? And like Wet Leg, they've proven all of their doubters to be rather silly and short-sighted, with their second album meeting, if not exceeding, the standards of the first. The presentation is not done by halves of The Last Dinner Party, though while their baroque pop ambitions only grow more gleefully singular on From the Pyre, it does feel like a mildly more restrained album than its predecessor. Less explicit theatrics, bye-bye titular prelude from Prelude to Ecstasy, and more studied, expansive songwriting, more subtlety, more depth. Prelude to Ecstasy was solid, engaging, and occasionally luminary. From the Pyre starts there and finds ways to burn ever brighter with its energy, its beauty, and its genuine emotion.
Don't cry for me, Argentina. The truth is I never left Tina. All through my wild days, my Argentina.
I said I was a sucker for folk, and I will take it no matter the package it shows up in. The third full-length from Argentine up-and-comer Milo J, La Vida Era Más Corta, bleeds Latin American musical heritage from every pore, with Milo breaking from the contemporary Argentine pop trends that helped him first find footing and instead diving into the pool of Latin and Andean folk and huayno. The album's soft, melodic, contemplative sound, exemplified especially by the album's breakout ballad Niño, is a welcome diversion from the pleasant but frustratingly okay trap Latino of 2024's 166, returning to the folk pop atmosphere of his debut, but strengthening the songwriting and the compositional imagination in turn. The respect for the musical traditions pulled in here is plainly apparent, but their use is never imitative, fused with but never subsumed by aspects of the arresting, radio-friendly contemporary Latin rap production he developed on album 2. All in all, it leaves La Vida Era Más Corta feeling like a proud and accomplished musical homecoming.
A base do seu Nissin! Nissin Lamen!
Three underground rappers from Brazil with rapidly growing solo discographies join forces here for a hard-hitting jazz rap record, and the results are positively incendiary. Full of attitude, the bars on Black Lawman may not hit quite as hard without a cursory knowledge of the vitriolic Portuguese language put-downs the trio are casting out, but D.S. Luki, Iku the Kid, and Young Exu have plenty enough presence and wit on the mic for the album to still land on presentation alone. The samples are inventive and unexpected, the beats are crisp and propulsive, and the three MCs all flip and switch and dovetail like the entire album is just one long cipher for them. Not just a highlight for Brazilian music for this year, not just a highlight for hip-hop for the year, but also one of the most stank-face-inducing, insightfully written, charismatically delivered records for the year too.
You know what? I'm trying to stay positive, but this bitch is getting on my nerve.
The title of Mayo Wicklow band Nerves' second EP, Jarveracht, can be a little bit difficult to translate. Remnanthood is about as pithy a rendering as I could fashion, but I've also seen much more poetic spinnings out of the word that take on a sense of empty, unsettled loneliness. All of the above could well feed into the interpretation of this brooding release, an unbending standing up to the awfulness of so much of the world at the moment. It's an uneasy protestation, mind. There's a pessimistic streak to the album that is hard to ignore, despite the rage and grit behind the songs. And despite the short length, it can sometimes plumb some rather exposing discomfort, drawing both from the general malaise of the age and more specific notes on less savoury sides of contemporary Irish life. Think Godspeed You Black Emperor writing CMAT's Euro Country, and you might be getting close. It's a markedly trenchant exploration of the dissatisfaction fostered by being young and numb these days, and a strong intensification in the observational acuity of this promising band.
Revenge! 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 Revenge!
Jane Remover is, to my eyes, already one of the most significant artists of the 2020s, with a noticeable influence on the proliferation of claustrophobic, densely textural digicore and dariacore over the past few years. And while 2023's census-designated was a slightly tidier production than Jane and their various side projects were typically giving us, taking their digital presentation in a roomier post-rock direction, Revenge Seekers brings us right back. Here we have a prime dose of that trademark chattering neon slot machine hyper-energy while pushing the core of the sound more in line with rage and electroclash, but also bubblegum bass and house than any of Jane's prior work. Well, Danny Brown has a feature on here and he fits in like a glove. With a focus on the increased attention and fame that their recent success has afforded them and how they navigate their life now that that's a variable, it's a deeply self-analytical read, anxious without pity, smutty without indulgence, proclamatory without arrogance, and fundamentally just really fucking in your face in the absolute best way. Maybe odd to some for such a short EP to make it this high up the list, but sorry, I like Artemis and I like what they do. After breaking out from the messy and, quite frankly, improbable implosion of Luna with 2024's Doll, Artemis quickly positioned themselves not just as the most experimental of the post-Luna acts, but at the frontier of the entire fifth generation, and Club Icarus is showing no sign of them slowing down. While it never pushes the envelope quite as far as Corners of Dahl chose to, Birth still remains a legitimately bonkers choice for a K-pop girl group single, and I love the fact that they went there. Club Icarus is far from short of imaginative twists and unlikely choices, from the micro-rhapsody that opens the track list to the fusion of liquid drum and bass elements and K-R&B on tracks like Goddess and Burn that help the EP live up to its title as a more dance-friendly endeavour. It's a sign of both the versatility and the vision of the five-piece, and if this track record continues, Artemis really may prove to be the defining group of their K-pop generation. Pervert's gay son or Willoughby Tucker thought daughter? That is the question. Ethel Cain needs little introduction to most by now after 2022's Preacher's Daughter threw her a little suddenly and starkly into the mainstream. What also needs little introduction to anyone who was around music social media when the first hints of Perverts came out is just how much of a shift people expected this to be. And while Cain did return to the ballpark of the majority of Preacher's Daughter and Willoughby Tucker, which, spoilers, is also showing up later in the list, I think the idea that Perverts was completely out of left field just exposes how selective people's memories of Preacher's Daughter really was. Sure, it was hardly a noise album, but the path from a song like Ptolemea to the more melodic corners of Perverts like on Amber Waves is a short and easily traversed one. All of that to say, for an exploration of electroacoustic and doomgaze and ambient drone with intense themes by arguably a pretty major pop star, it's a committed and high-quality one. And despite the tricky public response, or indeed maybe because of it, if Cain continues to flip-flop stylistically back and forth, I am more than ready for more of this kind of work from her.
Let me in! Let me in! Let me in, please!
The hell do you mean private music? I'm listening to it right now. These people think they're Mac Homie or something? Jesus. If there's one thing about Deftones, if their album has a white animal on a solid color background, it'll probably be pretty great. And sure enough, private music helps that rule hold fast with the Tones' best of a string of good releases since Koi no Yokan back in 2012. The alt-metal masters find a new vitalism in their robust fusional sound, trading out some of the unmitigated harshness of recent work for a return to the atmosphere and expansive blend of their hallmark sound. They're at their best when their ample power and heft behind the music leave space for lightness, be it through cavernous reverb, melodic vocals, energetic performance, or a bright, peppy mix, and private music exemplifies the strength of the band's breadth of inspiration as well as any classic release of theirs. It's bold and full-bodied and muscular and yet strikingly beautiful in corners too, and the light and dark only intensify one another in the hands of Moreno & Co. There's some absolute all-timer Deftones moments here, and it's great to have them still delivering such timeless work 30 years after their debut.
Speak now, or forever hold your peace. You're gonna hate me later. Speak now, or forever hold your
Piss?
Everybody, sound the underrated art pop alert! Can you tell the delirium of recording this in one sitting is starting to set in by now? Japanese-Canadian singer-songwriter Saya Gray's self-titled album may temper her experimental streak just a tad from her first record, 19 Masters, and certainly it's a markedly more mainstream effort than can be found on the two fascinating but at times obtuse QWERTY EPs from 2023 and 24. But by cooling off the bonkers by like 5%, she uncovers more plainly how compellingly crafted yet intimately approachable her songwriting can be. There are so many memorable corners on this album, so many evocatively written turns of phrase, so many engaging instrumental and timbral choices rooted in the album's washy, countrified indie sound. But despite the constant imagination and variation on show, a lot of the appeal here boils down to that really secure, evocatively realized sense of catchy, listenable art pop that sticks in the memory and calls out for re-listening. Perhaps the quirkiest crowd pleaser of the year, but I think most people would find a lot to love in this album.
Bueno, más fácil para mí hablar en español, básicamente gracias a todos los que estáis viendo este live desde donde estéis. Gracias. Bueno, yo me llamo Aitana, para quien no me conozca, soy una artista, una nueva artista realmente, una nueva cantante aquí en España.
Guitarca de la Fuente may be a damn sight more well known in the Anglophone sphere after his feature on Troye Sivan's latest project, but my guess is that he's still pretty underloved. And that's a shame now that he has two fantastic folk pop albums under his belt. La Cantera from 2022 continues to be an album I return to and explore anew each time, and while Spanish Leather is perhaps a little simpler on the surface, all the hallmarks of Alvaro Lafuente Calvo's melodic, symbolistic, yet easy to approach songcraft are present as before here. It's a careful balance he finds in his writing, lyrically a reflection on and exploration of contemporary gay life and love and culture that honestly rings fairly close to what Troye was writing on Something to Give Each Other. But with Calvo's roots in flamenco nuevo and traditional guitar and voice Spanish song, it's fused with a timeless folk foundation, a nostalgic sense of lyrical poetry, a perpetuity despite its contemporary concerns, even as the production flirts with more electronic alt-pop than his first album. But if that's not enough for you, consider his voice. Husky and warm, with an achingly tender head voice and the perfect vessel for these keenly felt reflections on heartbreak, desire, and the pursuit of connection. More people need to be on the Eiko Ishibashi train. Not only a source of some of the best and most emotionally resonant film music as of late, Watch Evil Does Not Exist if you don't believe me, her work outside of the cinema, both solo and with partner Jim O'Rourke, who produces this album, is equally imaginative and moving. It can be hard to pin down Ishibashi's songcraft, except that it's hard to pin down. Here on Antigone, for example, we can move from lounge music to avant electronica, psych rock to ambient pop, piano and accordion-backed ballads to deconstructed slow jams, at once both cinematic and small-scale, with opaque but inviting texts, ethereal harmonies, and a groove that never slips out from under the thumb, even as it complexifies and obfuscates. There's a wealth of material here on Antigone that a less confident artist would feel perhaps tempted to separate, filter out into separate, more one-note projects. But with Ishibashi's creative vision secure and all-encompassing, the end result manages an almost impossible feat of balance in leaving the record coherent and compelling throughout.
Listen to me. He has been going on and on about Mars. He has really been there.
Use your head, you dumb bitch. He's just acting out the secret agent portion of his ego trip.
The online music crowd largely finds themselves torn between two camps, those who use Rate Your Music and those who use Album of the Year. I happen to use both. And while Rate Your Music does tend to be a slightly more comprehensive resource, better for research into more obscure music and artists, Album of the Year tends to be better for exposing you to those random deep dive little pulls in the moment. Ego Trip from rapper John Michelle and producer Anthony James is exactly the kind of album that AOTY is brilliant at pushing in my direction. It's really become something of a 2025 darling on that site, and I'm 100% in agreement. The production here is slick as all get out, an immaculately vibey, jazzy, full-sounding dose of chipmunk soul that never tires or grates, detailed and warm and inviting, but never overly busy so as to detract from the great persuasive presence and tightly woven lyrics John Michelle and the various featured guests deliver on the mic. A quite frankly stunning debut full-length that needs way more attention outside of the online microcosm. Highly recommend giving this one a spin.
Up and away, my beautiful balloon.
It's easy to worry about posthumous releases sometimes. Too often they prove artistically hollow, economically motivated, fundamentally unflattering, if not downright disrespectful to their subject. But occasionally, it can be done right. See how Prodigy's posthumous vocals are treated on the Mobb Deep record further up on the full 300-strong list. The first posthumous release under Mac's name, 2020 Circles, was already a well-done example of finishing off an outstanding project with taste and subtlety, and it proved every bit the great companion album to 2018 Swimming that it was intended to be. But the material on Balloonerism dates back further, all the way to 2014, and it was already pretty well known in bootleg form amidst the fanbase, so there was maybe even more riding on getting this release right. But they did get it right, and while maybe not the absolute first Mac Miller record I'd recommend if you're new to the guy, Swimming is my rec for the record, it's a rewarding and poignant listen. The time around Faces, when this was first put together, was a transitional period for Miller's career between the immediacy of his early records and the broader, more ruminative style he grew to develop, and hearing it afresh on Balloonerism is not just transportative, but also deeply bittersweet. What a talent he proved to be, huh? Okay, Lou. Sorry, Okay Lou is a name that's been around for longer than you might realize. I remember checking into a collaborative EP she did with Canada's KCMQ all the way back in 2017 and thinking it was all cool and fine and perfectly pleasant. But now, in 2025, with 5 years since her debut full-length mixtape, we're finally starting to see Okay Lou really define her place in pop. And it's a dreamy, nostalgic, really welcoming one. Hypnagogic if you're the kind of person who actually uses that as a genre term. Casey's back to produce with her alongside PC music legends Danny Harl and A.G. Cook, and their fingerprints are all over this, sure. But there's something else about it, a distinct sense of wistfulness in the music here that's paired with a sure-footed, reflective intention. This is not merely shut-eyed millennium core, but a precise and personal distillation of retro-futuristic electronic pop and ambient artsy R&B. It's a plush and pleasing listen. Perhaps not the most challenging if I had to find any potential drawbacks, but come on, I'm really struggling to say anything majorly negative about this gorgeous, ethereal project.
Gun.
Its acclaim in the public eye, and indeed on this list, may have been slightly overshadowed by Turnstile, but there's no use denying how fundamentally good the Military Gun record from 2025 is too. Raucous and punchy their style remains, but whereas their 2023 debut, Life Under the Gun, is fueled by anger and righteous rage, the follow-up feels a little more unsure. God Save the Gun gave us doubt and self-accountability, and some pretty blatant self-loathing too, expressed in passages that are almost visual in their descriptive instancy and uncomfortable in their raw, unflinching honesty. But the catharsis is tempered by a real ear for melody and a knack for energetic riffs that kick their legs to pull some of the heavy lyrics out of the mire. It's a very different end product to Life Under the Gun, really, and it feels a little self-contradictory, with the musical elements brightening as much as the lyrics have darkened, but the end result is not a confusing, but a mightily compelling one. This shit's gay as hell, oh my god.
Mama!
Model Act trees are very cool. There's no two ways about this. If the list was solely about the vibes of an album and how much I fuck with the aesthetic, this would be top 5, no question. This thing has so much replay value. It's not a huge leap away from the rollicking, noisy industrial rock of their first record, Dog's Body, but on the follow-up, as the title might suggest, dance is a more front and center concern here. It feels like the band are leaning into a rougher, more grating interpretation of EBM, groovy and rhythmicized, though realized away from the sequencer console up on the risers in front of the mosh pit. But what pushes this album, like Dog's Body, into greatness is Cole Hayden's pen and performance. Queer as a $9 bill, achingly vulnerable, and yet gleefully theatrical all at once. His drawling baritonal Sprechgesang and the fragmentary, culturally patchwork lyrics are this band's calling card and the greatest of their many strengths.
Oh, oh, Tala, oh, cool. Tala, Tala, Tala.
God!
I've mentioned the windmill scene once already in this list, the bands and musicians who have gravitated around the eponymous Brixton pub and venue over the years. The sound most typically associated with the scene is that of emotionally overcast, nervily composed prog and post-rock, often with a decidedly mathsy or even slightly academic twist. Think Black Midi or Black Country New Road for the archetype. Hesse Kassel, however, aren't windmill regulars. They aren't even British. They're from Chile's capital, Santiago. And yet the influence is so clearly worn, I really do think that they should be included in this discussion here, and indeed celebrated as much as any major windmill player, because La Brea is an absolute blinder. The vocals are spoken in shouted word, the arrangements are lumbering and strained. Hell, there's even a saxophone. But don't think Hesse Kassel are merely some acolytes attempting a cheap Ants from Up There impersonation. La Brea is its own beast, heavy and fierce and ambitious and large format. There's a quickness, a fire in its belly, a mercurial quality that's all the album's own. And with lyrics that are sincere and emotionally interrogative, sometimes to the point of awkwardness, it makes for a remarkable debut with a lot of promise for what's ahead.
I see them bloom for me and you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
Sometimes the label of living legend can be a little over-allocated, but I think Mavis Staples is worthy of the title. Starting her career in family gospel band The Staple Sisters, she later became a mainstay of R&B, soul, and the civil rights movement, right through from the 60s to the present day. Now, in her mid-80s, she seems to continually reach new heights, and Sad and Beautiful World, named for the Sparkle Horse song covered on track 3, is the latest in a remarkable second wind of releases for her. A judiciously constructed album of covers with one Hosier and Alison Russell penned original The Wonderful Human Mind, there's a surprising breadth to the material Staples tackles here, ranging from Cohen and Waits through to Porter Wagoner, Gillian Welch, even Frank Ocean's Blonde. But with assured production and arrangement from Brad Cook and a whole host of cameos hiding in the mix, we're talking Buddy Guy, Cara Jackson, Jeff Tweedy, Bon Iver, Waxahachie, Bonnie Raitt, and more. Staples' voice effortlessly navigates both the technical and interpretative demands of her program. It's a heavy set of topics to sing on, and Staples isn't shying away from the same kind of astute social engagement that she's long foregrounded in her work, but there's an uncloudable radiance and pervasive, much-needed sense of hope to it all, too.
What about my grandmother? I hope she has a fucking stroke. Oh!
Oh god, this is going to be difficult to enunciate. Viagra Boys by Viagra Boys is, in a nutshell, my ideal direction for the Swedish post-punk sextet's music to progress in. I've been a fan in principle of a lot of their past work, but for one reason or another, whole projects have left me feeling a little cold. I can't quite put my finger on what's different on album 4, but Viagra Boys by Viagra Boys is comfortably my favorite set of work from them yet. Maybe it's the fact the whole project feels even more on edge than any of their others. Maybe it's that the stories being told feel just that little bit more out of the ordinary. Maybe it's that Viagra Boys' satirical social skewing and conscious character clowning feels even more urgent and necessary than it did a few years ago. But perhaps slightly paradoxically, the greater abstraction, the less immediately approachable songs on Viagra Boys by Viagra Boys makes me want to dive into the music all the more. It's funny, disconcerting, and wildly irreverent. The album opens with a couple of seconds of orgasmic moans for good measure, and it's backed by dancey, poppy, punk riffs with Sebastian Murphy's ever-idiosyncratic narrativizing over the top. It's exactly what I wanted it to be.
We've been waiting for you all summer, and we're so glad you're finally here!
I very nearly put Drugbug's subsequent EP on this list too, and trust me, Sometimes It Gets Worse is a very good project. Don't get me wrong, it's definitely an honorable mention you should get to as well. But it's its own distinct project, and unlike some of the other double bills on this list, that feels like it would be stretching the concept a little far, so A Season's End reigns alone. After the dissolution of underrated emo indie outfit Willie Rodriguez, the bandmate FKA Starstarer, aka Alex, has rebranded and tightened up their individual sound in relation to the band's embrace of the twee and the tearful, and has not put a foot wrong yet. It's undoubtedly pretty lo-fi, and the pleasing, unrefined quality found in some corners of the performance might distract from the competency of both the songwriting and the overall aesthetic cultivated by the production and instrumentation. But there's a remarkable give and take between the tongue-in-cheek and the sincerely felt that seems to tonally mirror the record's blend of throwback jangle pop and more modern bedroom indie aesthetics. It's an auspicious first full length for the new project, and some continued fine form from a prime indie artist.
That which is called ego death is coming to you. Remember, this is now the hour of death and rebirth. Take advantage of this temporary opportunity to obtain the perfect state. Enlightenment. Concentrate.
Hayley Williams releases a set of 17 songs, asks her fans which of them they like, and everyone in unison goes, all of them. And thus, Ego Death at a Bachelorette Party, the Paramore frontwoman's third solo record, was born. And wouldn't you know, the fans were right, as was Williams in adding 3 more tracks to round it out to 20. There is not a weak song on this project, not even close, and despite starting life as a semi-hidden online folder of random songs, the whole project is assembled so as to feel incredibly cohesive. There's a certainty to how Williams has gone about this album, not just with the non-standard release pattern, but the songs themselves too. It never sits fully stylistically still, charting wide, sweeping circles through alt-pop and indie rock. Over here, chopped up samples of Williams' voice. Over there, chipmunked counterpoint. Over here, we have blooming, layered vocal harmonies. Over there, a sparse, Mitski-ish solo line angularly seesawing its way along. Here, a close-mic'd slow jam. There, a fuzzy, trip-hopping pop-rock banger. And that's to say nothing of the load-bearing Bloodhound Gang interpolation at one point. It's a remarkable display of assured artistic expansion, and it might just be Williams' most compelling and fully realized solo effort yet.
I'm sending pictures of the most amazing trees.
No.
Sometimes I can wax lyrical about specific stylistic twists or conceptual bents, even details about the artists themselves that can enrich my appreciation and understanding and, yes, ranking of a particular record. But sometimes the record is just a prime example of perfecting what it's trying to achieve with little to no frills, and that's worth acknowledging too. Interior Live Oak, the latest from American singer-songwriter Cass McCombs, is just that kind of album. Over 2 decades into his career of consistently, sometimes unremarkably, reliable indie folk, Interior Live Oak comes along and, well, continues that high-quality streak with ease while going back to basics for a dependable blend of blues rock and indie Americana. There's a slight early Jarvis Cocker quality to how McCombs delivers the songs vocally, an offhand sardonic style that allows the humor, introspection, and imagery of this double album to really sing. It's a big listen at over an hour, but I wouldn't scrap a single song from it. It has the potential to go down as a classic in his discography. More Americana on hand here, with Low and Black Eyed Snakes frontman Alan Sparhawk pairing up with fellow Duluth music makers Trampled by Turtles for a progressive chamber folk record with a lot of heart and impact. As a follow-up to 2024's ambitious but uneven White Roses My God, Sparhawk has again channeled the grieving of losing his wife, bandmate, and creative partner Mimi Parker. Here he moves away from the former record's sparse and wavering electronic alt-pop for warm and full-bodied bluegrass, strings and banjos and electric guitar and frequent choral textures, providing a cocoon for his sadness and reconciliation to process. There's actually a re-recording of one of the old White Roses songs on here, track 3, Heaven, which capitalizes fully on the sad beauty within the lyrics far more effectively than on the older album. It's an assured stylistic sidestep for Sparhawk, aided by the dependable performance of Trampled by Turtles in fully realizing the ideas here. Still somber, still vulnerable, but a much better fit for Sparhawk's Costello-ish tenor and his plain-talking emotionality. I feel like I could spend a couple of days talking about how much I like Dan Behar's music and all the various projects he's been a part of over the years. Former member of Canadian indie icons The New Pornographers, half of occasional duo Hello Blue Roses with his wife Sydney Hermant, 1/3 of supergroup Swan Lake, let alone a few one-time projects, and maybe most significantly, the brilliant Destroyer. Behar and indeed Destroyer itself have been mainstays in Canada's music scene for 30 years now, often changing and reinventing their sound as each record sees fit, but here he gets a little retrospective. The band feels more cohesive and consciously identifiable here, breezy and psychedelic but never indistinct or generic. Meanwhile, the thematic strands of the album are focused more precisely on aging, deterioration, and the passing of time, ideas that Behar has said have gotten really real now that he's older. It still allows itself to riff on less concrete concepts in corners. I Materialize is about as abstract as Destroyer has ever been, but for its knowing gaze into the rapidly approaching future, it remains playful, imaginative, and surprisingly at peace. It's a major highlight in Behar's huge catalogue and comfortably one of the band's best.
Wasn't a hologram! Holograms?
You'd be forgiven for thinking that Stereolab were in the middle of a career-high solid run instead of making a return to the limelight with a whole 15 years elapsed since their last album. Instant Holograms on metal film has every bit of the kraut-derived progressive indie-tronic charm you'd want from a Stereolab album. Tim Gain and Laetitia Sadier still with an innate knack for working together and writing timely retro-futurist pop. It's no grand reimagining of the Stereolab formula. Why would you want to rework a formula that good? But neither are we just returning to the very same band of 15 years ago. There's a freshness to Instant Holograms despite how familiar the band's work is able to feel. Maybe it's that the world has finally caught up to them in their genre-free playfulness and their embrace of the left-wing worldview, but the balance between Sadier's smooth, frosty singing, the wit and perspicacity of the lyrics, and the genuine exuberance of the instrumental productions here feels newly alive and energized.
It was scary. It was scary. It was really scary, and
Back to the windmill we go for the latest from scene stalwarts Squid. Continuing to push away from their earliest sound that was rooted firmly in post-punk, we now find them swimming in lush electro-psych rock while keeping the grit in the system with dark and dreary lyrics about the worst sorts of people in the world. The whole concept could leave the record feeling pretty draining if it wasn't so droll in the way that it's put together. Frank's my friend, Ollie sings in the Ryu Murakami-inspired Building 650. There's murder sometimes, but he's a real nice guy. It reminds me in many ways of Geordie Greep's The New Sound thematically, a takedown of modern-day apathy and chauvinism and awfulness with an angry tongue dressed in sarcasm and sardonic wit. Though while the Greep cloaked his incel evisceration in charismatic progressive Latin jazz fusion, Cowards is less obtuse, with the synth-fringed art rock often landing as uneasily as the words. It's another great development from the group into a denser and more distinctive world of expression, and one of the year's most gleefully unhinged records.
We never know. Because life's mysteries are constantly unfolding like a lotus flower, growing wild in the untamed country of our hearts and feet.
A different sort of breakup album here from Little Sims, whose Lotus provides an indignant account of the messy fallout between her and her longtime producer and friend Inflo. Inflo, one of the major voices behind UK collective Salt, along with Sims and Cleo Sol, was a producer behind Sims' last 3 albums, including the honestly decade-defining Mercury winner Sometimes I Might Be Introvert. But after a lawsuit over him not repaying a £1.7 million loan, Sims split from her producer and forged her way forward. The disloyalty she faced informs the tone of Lotus, wounded but proud, vulnerable yet fierce, introspective yet empowered, with a more outwardly philosophical tone that ponders life lessons both to consider and to pass on. And while there is definitely some wild stylistic choices, the potentially confounding but absolutely hilarious Young being maybe the widest swing, there's also a reclamation of the Salt sound that she proved so important in fashioning, soulful and harmonic and rich, and a host of great collaborators to liven the music further. If there was ever any doubt that Sims would founder without her not-so-trusty producer, she rather brilliantly proved it unfounded, which feels as much part of the album's message as anything said on it. Just brilliant all around.
Oh, mean
vicious, straight-razor toting woman. Lord have mercy.
There are few albums on this list that hooked me as quickly as Mercy did. From the discombobulating opening seconds of Laraji's proggy guitar tones, Elucid's flow punching out cultural calling cards like a jazz rap recitative, I was blocked the fuck in. After 2021's controversially covered Haram, where the duo of Billy Woods and Elucid brought on The Alchemist to produce, they co-billed on 2023's acclaimed We Buy Diabetic test strips, and the partnership clearly continues to thrive on Mercy. Woods and Elucid. I fucked up the audio again, my bad. Have long made a good match with their nuanced, flexible, and frequently elliptical pen game, and over The Alchemist's imaginative and often unexpected productions, their wordsmithery and stream-of-consciousness-esque flows get maximum space and freedom. It's perhaps a skosh less grandiose and all-questioning than either Haram or Test Strips, with the trio looking for their answers more amidst flights of fancy from the everyday, smaller-scale protest and resistance, and dogged, persistent being. But what they find there is every bit as essential and invigorating.
Holling, it's starting to snow.
Yeah. Isn't that nice?
Bon Iver, Holling.
Bon Iver, Ed.
Let's do a little role-play exercise. What would you do if you were Bon Iver and over a few albums you developed one of the most influential and recognizable avant-pop sounds in current popular music? May I suggest making some grade A white boy soul? There's little telling what inspiration will strike Justin Vernon next, after cutting his teeth in lo-fi indie folk and adding in some occasional electronic elements that end up proving a huge influence to fucking Kanye of all people. He then drops 22 A Million, one of the most forward-thinking, acclaimed, and timeless records of the 2010s. He develops the sound on 2019's I. He takes a little detour doing more work than you might expect with Taylor Swift and The National, and then kind of nothing save some live performances. It took us until 2024 for what ended up being disc 1 of Sable Fable to land, and we're back to the folk again? But the full album comes out, and it's a much more multifaceted affair. Yes, the opening EP Sable is plainly gorgeous, and while the intricacy of the production hasn't changed, it's nice to hear Vernon's folk roots returning to the fore on songs like Spaceide and the stunning Things Behind Things Behind Things. But Disc 2, Fable, broadens out and pivots into lush chipmunk soul and sophistopop, adding yet another string to his apparently unbreakable bow. Sometimes it's worth just sinking into an unmitigated beauty of an album, and this is the perfect candidate.
Adrian, Chloe, me, our families see us as diamonds.
And I wasn't invited?
Of course not. You're not a precious stone. You're just a stone.
Centuries are up amongst my favorite underloved indie rockers, never dull, always unexpected, and luckily for me they decided to drop both halves of another stellar project just 1 year after The Great Snow is a metaphor for death. And while I maybe might slightly lean towards the songwriting on Snow over both sides of Gem of the West, what is a marked development here is the technical togetherness from the band, the ability for them to really inhabit the noisy, angular grooves they're laying down. The Disc 2 EP skews a little closer to the explicitly punk rock energy of their older work, with the bulk of the newer synthier sound confined to the first disc, but when viewed as a whole, the two halves really complement each other nicely. Kim Elliott and co. do the bold but ultimately rewarding thing of leaning concertedly into the slightly goofy energy their music can sometimes carry with it, playing more with intentional clumsiness and janky quality. It's not the first project of theirs I'd recommend for a newcomer, but it's a plenty fine feast for the familiar.
He's made a spectacular breakthrough. We're in the process of making a new man.
I'm always on the lookout for new men.
No, it's fine. I just wasn't expecting it to be Korean is all. In my defense, I wasn't looking at the track names when I pressed play on this album at random back in May. I didn't know the band, and even for sludgy hardcore like this, what vocals there are buried in the mix. So looking randomly back and seeing Hangul on my phone screen was a bit of a shock. I'm just not used to Korean rock sounding like this. I honestly don't know if there's a huge metal scene in South Korea, but this was a blistering introduction for me to whatever there is of it. Busan band Bon, Busan Banban,
Bed Bath & Beyond
have a confidence in their sound and their ideas that almost gives some tracks here a kind of jam band freeness. Chunky, cycling riffs that are allowed to settle and bake in before new ideas and elements are introduced on top. At the center, a triptych of raucous, stirring tracks that really do provide the peak of the record in almost every way. Neumann is an unexpected delight that sweeps you up in its monumental might and intensity.
It's a quick quack, quickest and the cleanest by far. We're talking 3 skinny minutes, sit right in your car and watch 100 plus feet of brushes brushing right bar. The quick quack car wash.
This is not the first album on this list that takes a circumspect glance at the modern world and finds it all a bit shit, nor will it be the last. Midwest emo heavyweights La Dispute's latest No One Was Driving the Car takes its title from the reporting into a fatal crash involving a self-driving Tesla, and that's only maybe the 10th most scathing read of contemporary society in the album. What La Dispute don't offer here are answers. They're aware of the potential futility of claiming to know too much in a world that's both frequently shifting and often moving in ways out of our control. But what they do is catalog their grievances, both of those in their individual lives and those they can't help but witness in the world around them. And as chroniclers of the overall enshittification of 21st century life, and as craftspeople fashioning it into hard-hitting portions of post-punk pith, there are few who can hold a candle to them.
No, baby, no. No, baby, no. Stay on the stage.
Baby Dijon. Not a kid-friendly addition to the condiment aisle, but a wild and wacky alt R&B record more than worth your time. It's been a few years since Dijon's first full-length, 2021's Soulful Absolutely, and the time away seems to have fostered a prominent experimentalist bent in the musician's taste and approach to all things soul. There were hints of glitchy production and chipmunking on album 1, but nothing close to even how he chooses to start, Baby. Screwy, pitch-drifting slacker rock that quickly blurs the border with psych soul. There's a real restless leg to this thing, never quite sticking in one place sonically, but it works. The days of new fatherhood, both the chaos and the ecstasy, feel eloquently encapsulated in the genre bending and the excessive production style. The newfound adventurous spirit is no distraction, no diversion, but instead a conscious and compelling enrichment of Dijon's already strong songcraft, and it makes for an intricately re-listenable project with both heart and head at full capacity.
It's like no matter how hard I try, it's never enough. I'm never enough.
Maybe not quite the people's princess in the way a certain other East Coast alt-rock band have proven to be this year. But Turnstile are one hell of a phenomenal group regardless, and never enough has them operating at newly found heights. This feels like not just a follow-up, but a full sequel to the band's last record, 2021's Glow On, pushing both the hardcore roughness and the drifting dream pop of that album's sound further apart, stretching out the elastic until it settles into a surprisingly balanced equilibrium. If Geese always sound unmistakably Geese, Turnstile instead prove that almost anything can be the sound of Turnstile, and it massively opens up the sonic spaces they can inhabit, the kinds of bold leaps they can make from track to track without falling out of bounds. It's ambitious in a way few bands dare to be, a kind of raiding the dress-up box approach where everything ends up looking great on them, and it makes for an alt-rock album that's pleasingly pop and truly Turnstile all at once. Hannah Francis's is a musicianship defined by space. There is a breadth to her work, whether in its narratives, its themes, or its construction. But the immediate corollaries of space are loss and distance, and after 2024's stark and striking Keeper of the Shepherd processing with frank honesty the fallout from the death of her father, Nested in Tangles now tackles the fraught navigation of the distance between those left behind. And this sense of entanglement is in many ways a perfect encapsulation of both the frustrations of Fractured Family and Francis's own artistry. The obstacles that can grow up or descend in the midst of what was once clear-cut emotional reciprocity are rendered via the complexified intricacies and abrupt interruptions that knot and twist through the abstracted folk palettes of the record. Some may have been tempted towards simplicity, a calm and clear-sighted folksy questioning of what if, but Francis has opted for the crumpled-up cathartic rendition of what could have been, and I think I know which direction I prefer.
In food, which vegetable is the principal ingredient in the Irish pancake dish boxty?
Potato.
Correct.
Yes, Pink, I would really like to meet you. Hey, ooh.
Oh, yeah.
Parallel to the British pop soul successes of late, think Ray, Olivia Dean, Cleo Sol, Joey Crooks, etc., has been the recent surge in female-led British dance music. Nia Archives, Venby, Becky Hill, Peary, Kenya Grace. I can think of countless examples who've taken off recently, all putting out catchy and often very creative dance. But at the vanguard of it all is Pink Pantheress. She's had some growing success over the past few years. Where have you been if you managed to avoid Boy's a Liar? But with both Fancy That and its comparatively gargantuan remix and features album Fancy Some More, she's truly placed herself as a leading artist of the moment. Pink Pantheress's iteration of dance is firmly rooted in that of the past. The samples she pulls are almost exclusively from the choicest highlights of house, indie, and trance from between 15 and 30 years ago, the likes of William Orbit and Underworld and The Streets, and when paired with her airy, conversational vocal style and packaged into snappy, streamable bops, it forms a bridge between the then and the now. The remix album is admittedly a bit more variable in quality, with each of the main songs from the album getting multiple new versions that are less uniform in their creativity, but sometimes we really strike gold, like with K-pop coterie 17 over chattering MIDI pianos on the refashioned Illegal, or especially the Sugababes recreating their own sample on the redone Nice to Know You. Fancy some more? Yeah, alright.
Sing the wondrous love of Jesus.
If I'm ever putting on a metal album for fun, it needs to be bringing me something more than just wall-to-wall sound. I get that there's an appeal in that. Hell, I was a card-carrying Merzbow megafan for a good few years. I understand the craving for a musical experience that feels like wearing a suit of armor into an MRI. But the best metal for me is the stuff that knows how to balance the terror and the heft with harmony, with texture, with beauty, and Agriculture's The Spiritual Sound is a prime example of the kind of heavy that gets me going. The Spiritual Sound is more definitively black gaze than, say, what Coffrey de Bijou is serving up, less of the immediate genre hopping, more of a committed exploration of a smaller overall set of sounds, but that discipline there allows them to push every variable in every direction, be it speed, instrumentation, grit, cleanness, virtuosity, anger, or pure bliss. Helmed by both Dan Meyer and Leah Levinson, again occupying two ends of a vocal spectrum, it feels like a catalogue of what Agriculture could do with their sound, not for its own sake, but as a way of communing in the glorious multitudes found within the music. Quite the spiritual sound indeed.
Oh my. Okay, everybody say Stardust. Start. Woo! Got it. That's gonna be a great one.
If you know Danny Brown, you know the kind of headspace this is going to throw you into. That's not a criticism. There are few artists like Danny that can even attempt to find their way towards this overwhelming hyper-hip-hop wasteland, and the fact that he can make it through pretty unscathed is nothing short of miraculous. Newly sober and reinvigorated, Brown reminds everyone why they should give a damn on what is, to me, the most extraordinary artistic achievement of his since Atrocity Exhibition, and yes, I'm including Scaring the Hose in that statement. His punchy, tenorial flow now cutting shapes amidst heavy-hitting hyper and post-pop from the likes of Quedeca, Underscores, Fentanyl, and Jane Remover, emphasizing that just because the sound is brighter and the inspiration less inebriated, he's still got a wealth left to say. If 2023's Quaranta feels like a somber signing off on troubles of the past, Stardust feels like the full-throttled calling out to what's coming next, and it's every bit as illuminating as its title.
Hello? Ew. You're ugly. Oh my god. Don't look at me.
It's no forever story. Like, what else could be the Forever Story? But second best JID album of the decade is still going to land light years ahead of a lot of what's out there. Perhaps the most charming and approachable part of what the Atlanta rapper is setting out to achieve here is a sense of freedom, of mold breaking, of colouring outside the lines. And if God does like ugly, who am I to argue? It could be seen as a cop-out, frankly, but trust me, JID needs no cop-out here. Even if the lyricism is a little less potent and raw, the production a little more casual and carefree than TFS, it's still top-rate work, returning to the rapper's upbringing as a continued source of material, but opening up to the voices of the spiritual, the social, and the cynical to all make their cases known. There are big themes that have the potential to reduce down to insularized navel-gazing, but that's not what JID wants for himself, and it's not what he wants for us, either. Ultimately, what we land on is a conscious embrace of effort, individuality, and imperfection that feels universal in its applicability and its outreach.
Sorry, didn't mean to frighten you. You're a bit late for that! Hate when he does that.
While I've tried to leave my personal biases towards particular artists at the door, I can't help it, man. I love a Florence and the Machine album. The voice is the immediate appeal, of course, but the poetic sensibility and the ever-evolving but always expansive sound world that Welch curates are right behind it, and all three are among the highlights of Everybody Scream. A more self-concertedly witchy album in aesthetics, leaning into the images and frequent comparisons of Florence's earlier career, Everybody Scream makes good on the maximalism that is sometimes leveled against her as something of a negative. Here, it's transformed into a lusty, triumphant, and sometimes pointedly confrontational shout after some difficult years for the singer. By fusing the earlier album's baroque pop with the symphonic rock of How Big, How Blue, How Beautiful, the more confessional songwriting of Highest Hope, the artistic ecstasy of Dance Fever, we perhaps reach peak FATM in the surest, most exuberant statement of expression from Welch and her collaborators yet. It's a cathartic and beautiful piece of work.
Please, don't hurt me. Don't be afraid.
Yeah! I have half a mind to just tell you that this album is flat out gorgeous and leave it there, because if there's one project this year that has been able to soothe my mind over all others, it is Luminescent Creatures. Even for Ichiko Aoba, this thing is positively Edenic, the musical equivalent of the slowly undulating textural changes of a shelf of anemones or the gentle glassy ripples of a shoal of glow-in-the-dark algae. It's a project that shamelessly front-loads the peaceful and the ambient above all else. While the texts she sings are imaginative and elusive and replete with much of the same aquatic imagery, it's the serene harmonies, the crystalline textures, the gentle timbres of harp and harmonic strings, piano and swelling pads that are the first point of evocation. I don't want to say much more, as nothing quite compares to the joy of just letting this music wash over you.
Yeah, it's too strong. So, the snowstorm can't get us here.
For a lot of people, their first introduction to Dove Ellis's name would have been the announcement that the Irish folk singer would be opening for Geese on their latest tour. That's not really that surprising. The guy is pretty press shy, and it was hard to find too much about him to pad this list entry. But that's okay, the songs do more than enough speaking for him. Ellis's Blizzard is a really rather unexpected debut in that it just plainly doesn't sound like one. I can see what Geese, specifically Cameron Winter, must see in his music. There's a timelessness here that I also hear in some of Winter's writing, a sense that these songs have to be old classics because of how naturally they just settle. But here, that's every song. It's an inimitable quality to have as a folk singer-songwriter, an enviable one even, for your music to just belong instantaneously. But don't think that it's a case of damning with faint praise. This belonging comes with a sense of tangible musical and cultural identity with each song, sometimes even breaking through to surface like with the driving pulse of the jig on Jaundice. It's a pretty special introduction to an incredibly talented musician.
Climb up. No, you! I'm scared of heights. I get a nosebleed if I climb to the top of a bunk bed.
I do not remember Wednesday sounding this country. I like it though, screwed up and problematized and sandblasted though it can be. Wednesday, and in particular Carly Hartzman up front, are pulling no punches on the follow-up to the band's breakout success Rat Saw God, angry and open and dry, and often incredibly funny too. Unsettling images and morbid jokes land with the same kind of wry side-eye that embarrassing and honest self-deprecations do. First-date fuck-ups and burning buildings and disappointing gigs, and depending on how much you want to read into it, the end of Hartzman and MJ Lenderman's relationship too. All dumped onto the table to sort through. Bleeds has this raggedy energy to it, a sense of staying awake too long and letting the filter drop. But I've got to say, if the rope is fraying ever so slightly, it's tied together a pretty great set of songs in the process.
11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Funk e Matematica is a bold statement for an album. Like another project later down in the list, it seems to be making a proclamation about a whole genre, a kind of thesis statement, if you will, that funk is mathematics. But in this little-known and massively underappreciated release from Brazilian producer Pipa, it makes sense. Not so much in the hyper-complexified way that we normally see math as a modifier in music, but more in a geometric, structural way. Over 7 numbered movements plus a final title track, the footprint and rhythms and aesthetic core of Funk Brasileiro are strung into a galvanizing, punchy suite of songs with a thick layer of chip-tuned drones and ambient synths over top. It doesn't simply dilute the grit and distinctive propulsive quality of Brazilian funk, turn this thing up and it will still wallop you over the head and into the floor, but it does present an alternate conception of what the genre can sound like, and it's an incredibly compelling, infectiously re-listenable one.
For fuck's sake.
As Ireland's musical exports continue to gain traction across the world, one particular critical darling managed to take the leap into full-blown pop star and brought with her a searing takedown of the ills that plague Ireland's recent social history, the scrutiny of the public eye, celebrity culture, and her own continuing journey to love herself a little more. CMAT's Eurocountry is something of an unlikely hit on her side of the pond, countrified and bold and political in a way that's both self and outwardly critical, and, oh god, heaven forbid, from a strong, outspoken queer woman?
Mama!
And yet the brilliance of CMAT's songwriting, the precision of her aim, makes the whole sum total of the endeavour feel triumphant even when cradling deeply tragic inspirations at its core. You don't need to be Irish, or a young woman, or an insecure lover, or even overly sick of Jamie Oliver, just go with it, to resonate with the heart of everything being sung about here. And that's the crux of why Eurocountry has proven to break out in quite such a big way. This one should prove to have a very long shadow, and I couldn't be happier.
Gentlemen, you lonely? I hate to see a man lonely.
Metal can be a hard sell for a lot of people, and for a big blackened metal record to become so firmly part of the year's major general musical discourse is testament not just to its undeniable quality, but to the emotional impact it's able to communicate. Deaf Heaven, the metal band whose album covers never look like metal albums, are back 4 years after the slowcore sidestep of Infinite Granite, and ready for a scrap. The instrumentals feel like a condensation of the energy and body the group have been consistently evolving and varying since their breakout in the early 2010s. Meanwhile, George Clark's scream is on top form as ever, the cleans tender but rarely relied upon. And it's a good thing too, because leaning on the roar and the punch and the impact perfectly fits the themes here. Like the Squid album, Deaf Heaven are taking aim here at awfulness, big and small, the rot set in the modern rat race, the need for validation, an audience, and yes, power. Structured almost theatrically, spaciously produced, and perfectly paced, it's a monumental achievement for the band, and a new high watermark for the kinds of conceptual and emotive reaches they can achieve.
I knew you'd take all my honey, you selfish mother.
There's a couple of albums every year that primarily hook me with the general sound of a single or a select track, the production catching my attention before the actual songwriting, the themes or concepts, or even the name behind it factoring into how seriously I'm diving in. Ego Trip from earlier in the list was one of those albums too, in a way, but I think this micro-category is best exemplified by this gorgeous Blood Orange project. Another entry in the Oh Hi Caroline Polachek pantheon of 2025. See also Caroline, and on the full list, These New Puritans too. Dev Hynes' latest work under the Blood Orange moniker is particularly stuffed with an eclectic set of features. Not just Polachek, but novelist Sadie Smith, Brendan Yates from Turnstile, Lord, Amandla Stenberg, Mabe Frati. You get the idea. But for all these various collaborators, the album is deeply rooted in Hynes' own Essex upbringing amidst reconciliation with recent grief, and the closeness he clearly feels with the material is evident in the warmth and tenderness and ultimately joy with which he approaches this album's production. It's about as all-encompassing as such an intimate and personal album can get, but Blood Orange has a way of filtering through the noise to deliver an elegant and reflective sophistopop success.
Hi, my name is Bianbi, and you are watching Disney Channel.
There is a true horrorcore masterpiece from 2025 on this list, but perhaps surprisingly, Clipping aren't the ones to release it. After back-to-back brilliance on There Existed an Addiction to Blood and Visions of Bodies Being Burned, both genuinely intimidating claustrophobic records with album covers that look like they'd run you through, the LA hip-hop trio ditched the spook for a much less disquieting turn to hyper-electronicized, acidified glitch hop and cyberpunk. But even if the aesthetic window dressing of the album has shifted, the consistencies that make Clipping such a vital voice in hip-hop remain ever present. Hudson and Snipes' production is unflinching in its reach, pulling in wide-ranging collaborators for maximum impact, while Daveed Diggs' flow is nimble and versatile. The conceptual heart of the record, that retrofuturism was a lie and that the technological future of the past was an unfulfillable promise, is pretty crushing, but the three-piece managed to make the realization of that truth a compelling and theatrical listen anyway.
People are always talking, but what happens when the talk isn't cheap and it is what it is? Well, what I mean by this is Hillary Clinton. Man.
Is it quite as all-encompassingly wonderful as Bryan Costanzo's last album, 2023's The Last Rotation of Earth? No, not quite, but that'd be difficult. That last album is up amongst my favourite records of the whole decade so far. But BC Camplight's often dour, yet brusquely humorous, cabaretish chamber pop rarely misses for me, and on a sober conversation, he continues to excel at it. The mood hasn't lightened much from the last record, and that was about the literal apocalypse. In fact, it dives even deeper into personal traumas and tragedies that Costanzo himself has only recently reckoned with. But it also allows for a sober conversation to find a grueling, yet ultimately gratifying progression from bitterness to calm. The production and instrumentation is lush as ever, pianos and strings and brass backing up a more typical indie rock ensemble like a theater band working overtime, and the lyricism continues to find that sweet spot between tongue-in-cheek and unsettlingly honest. Oh, and there's a cameo from The Last Dinner Party's Abigail Morris, too, if you needed one more reason to check this out. Love it.
Feel this boy. Understand the pain. You think I was always the picture of strength that I am now?
Maruja's February 2025 EP, named for the Irish mythical realm of Tir na Nog, is great. But their long-awaited full-length debut in September is even better. Another group frequently conflated with the broader Windmill sound, it's probably no surprise by now that this was getting on the list, but I have to say, Pain to Power goes so immediately harder than almost anything else in the scene this year. This is plainly one of the most righteously rageful records of the year, the band's roaring jazz punk let loose on the world's manifold ills with a blistering, urgent call for solidarity in the face of juggernauting complicity at the center of everything. It's dark, heavy, and pretty bitter stuff, but the real potency of Maruja's work is that it never feels despondent. That anger is not directed inwards, nor is it just shouted into a void. It's sharp and directional, and an embodiment of the through line suggested by the album's title. You're feeling pain? Well, a lot of us are, so you might as well harness it and transform it into something powerful.
You like jazz, Evan?
Yeah.
Let me play something for you.
Jazz can be a tough sell. Even as someone who played some at school and college, who's done the listening appreciation classes, who knows the history, some corners of contemporary jazz, particularly avant-garde instrumental jazz, can present something of a barrier for the more casual listener to get a secure handhold on. If you relate, and even if you don't, I really think this fieldwork record might be the gateway for you. Vijay Iyer, Tyshawn Sari, and Steve Lehman are all big enough names in the jazz sphere on their own, but something magical happens when they get together, and after 17 years, their reunion is worth celebrating. Thereupon is a propulsive record that retains the ingenuity and wide-reaching inspirations of the best avant-jazz, but learns maybe its most salient lessons from pop and rock, discernible melody, vibrant performance, and solid groove. It's not watered down in any way, mind. There's nothing simple going on here, even if it's less outwardly abstract than some of what's come before. But the trio have found a way of packaging their overflowing invention in tunes that are upward-gazing, open-armed, and fundamentally inviting to all.
All that I had wished for.
A woefully underknown musician from South Korea, Heejin Jang has for a few years now been basically my favorite creative in the entire noise genre, with 2023's Me and the Glassbirds and its menagerie of flittering, twittering industrial atmosphere still sitting pretty as the best noise release this decade for me. Several great records have followed from her, but 2025's Souvenirs from Hell is a particularly interesting switch-up in that it could almost pass in corners for a fucked-up little IDM record. Not an easily danceable one, mind. Oftentimes vastly different pulses overlap and overtake each other like celestial bodies out of orbital sync, and in case the title didn't tip you off, the crushingly bleak atmosphere remains with force. But the way that rhythmic cells are treated as filigree instead of foundation, and the overall shorter, more digestible structure of the album and songs makes Souvenirs from Hell hit more immediately than many of Jang's past releases, without sacrificing any of her emotional weight and stylistic profundity.
I've got a computer.
So true, Queen. Don't we all? If Revenge Seekers pushed us to the ragiest ends of electropop, I Love My Computer's success is to be instead found in Gen Z attention deficit and hyperfixation. High tempo, high octane, and high maintenance, the sound of Aussie DJ and producer Nina Wilson's second full-length project is pretty well summed up by the techno paraphernalia littered around the image on the cover of the album. Digitized, distracting, and dense, I Love My Computer captures a distinct noughties sound in its super-referential, nostalgic, dare I say brain-rotted retrospection, with a distillation of house, EDM, complextro, and what we might now call hyperpop being the perfect sonic summation of the overwhelm and overexposure that comes with a generation that grew up online. It's clearly an emotionally loaded embrace of the tech, particularly as the album progresses. The addictive quality of the music is tempered by increasingly twisted and uneasy lyrical images on tracks like Info Hazard and Delete. But that's how almost everyone in our generation is feeling now. The tech we grew up with is here to stay, but the times have changed, and we're starting to realize just how complicated it makes everything.
Here, hold this a sec.
Ow! Ow!
Put.
No!
Okay, confession. The first time I heard that there was a band called Yahweh Nailgun, I was sure it had to be a joke. One of those stock-name hardcore bands used in a TV show, so on the nose its flagrant blasphemy and unapologetic edginess is. And yet, after listening to 45 Pounds, I don't know, it kind of fits like a glove. That in-your-face attitude is gleefully present on such song titles as Penetrator, Castrato Raw Fullback, and Ultra Shade Beat My Blood Dog Down? Jesus Christ. That's before you even pressed play. Honestly, if you've ever heard anything that sounds like this album, please let me know, because this strange, lopsided, post-industrial, tinny, poppy, Talking Heads meets Animal Collective meets Gillaband sound absolutely threw me for a loop the first time. This whole album feels spontaneous in its delivery, the tuned drum fills, curt guitar figurations, and no-wave vocal eccentricities, a strange and captivating kind of filigree. But I don't know how you'd ever land on these kinds of sounds and structures without the faculty of a deranged demiurge. It's somehow raw and experimental, and yet ridiculously catchy too, invigorating and yet insanely feel-bad at the same time. Honestly, I can't really say much more about it. It's essential that you go and experience these sounds in your own ears and make up your own mind on this thing. It kind of leaves me in awe.
When he operated on a deaf dog, the newspapers took note. Unfortunately for Cheetah the Blue Heeler, the operation didn't restore his hearing.
Aside from sounding like someone trying to improvise the name of a Whistler painting, Blue Heeler and Ugly Snow White Grey on Grey on Grey on White is also the name of the latest album from singer-songwriter Kitchen. This was an introduction for me to the work of James Keegan, a Rochester, New York artist whose work I have grown to love through retroactive exploration, but this mighty 77-minute slowcore-ish indie folk collection is where the journey began, and it was a mighty fine place to start. There are countryisms on this record that are sparingly but consistently utilized to liven the foundations of the sound here, as Keegan's contemplative and patient songs build up from simple guitar patterns and unpretentious structures in always charming directions. Basically every song on this project has at least one corner that I just wanted to loop and sink into, with swelling foundations of accordion and melodica, an unfussy and authentic vocal performance, and stunning and memorable lyrics that tackle all too relatable anxieties and heartbreaks. Being left behind by a loved one or a friend, the passing of time, the feeling of stagnation, even goddamn global warming and the harm we can do the world around us. Take that image how you will. It's a committed listen through. For all its beauty and wonder, it's quite a sobering experience, but it's more than worth blocking the time out for.
Miley, tell us about your new album. Would you like an avocado? I would. If you, your new album.
God may like ugly, but I'm sure he doesn't mind something beautiful too. The latest extravagant production from the honestly now iconic Miley Cyrus is, in my opinion, the greatest work of hers to date in basically every way, and the deluxe version heightens it even more. Cinematic in scope, literally, ambitious in design, and by all accounts, well, if you ignore like half the critics who wanted her to make more radio pop, wah! Incredibly successful in execution, Miley's apocalyptic vision of end-time hedonism mixing disinhibited letting loose with bittersweet reminiscence would already be an impressive enough concept. But then you factor in the actual music, and it elevates that impressive enough concept into a fully blown masterpiece of post-pop, where disco and psychedelic rock rub shoulders like drunken bon vivant in this sweaty mist of a nightclub. And it is pop. Miley's got the ear, she knows who to work with, and she knows how to bring these disparate elements together in a way that remains catchy, accessible, and interesting. But these are huge, daring swings from a mainstream artist, particularly one whose last album did feel safe after the 80s revivalism of Plastic Hearts, and, you know, Ryan Beatty, Always, Buckingham Fleetwood, David Byrne, Brittany Howard, and Cole Hayden from Model Actors, amongst others, sharing credits on a Miley Cyrus record, that's nothing to sniff at. It's a little exhausting, come the very final bars, truth be told, but I'm choosing not to complain, not when Miley's vocals sound this great, the compositions and track sequencing are this expansive and bold, and the creative vision is this refreshing. This is something beautiful for sure.
Focus on the music, think melody, let the music be my guide.
Yeah, that would be a start.
Great singers from Veracruz, like buses, seem to come in threes, and after Cesare Suhardin and Silvana Estrada, it's due time we made our way to Natalia Lafourcade. A major figure in Mexican music and the wider Latin scene, Lafourcade's music has long been subject to shifting influences and styles, and after the folk and traditional musics of her work in the late 2010s and early 2020s and the jazz injection on 2022's De Todas las Flores, it's rewarding to see her uniting them all in Cancionera. But it's not just the approach to genre that has me more excited than usual here. Cancionera is a live studio album, recorded on tape with an 18-strong accompanying band and no digital correction in sight. Lafourcade gives herself up to an alter ego simply titled La Cancionera, or The Songstress, allowing herself to fully embody the spirit of the music even more acutely than before. It is a love letter to Mexico's traditions and culture, a tribute to the spirit of all kinds of Latin music, and an exploration of the many contrasting dualities of life that Lafourcade positions herself as a vessel or tributary for. Somehow, her magical musicianship still has room to blossom further. This is a really special one.
Back off! I have magic power!
May 2021. I'm looking for something to listen to. There's this new jazz rap record that's getting some buzz. I put it on and fall in love. It's McKinley Dixon. June 2023. I'm looking for something to listen to. There's this new jazz rap record that's getting some buzz. I put it on and fall in love. It's McKinley Dixon. June 2025. You won't guess what happened. Magic Alive is the latest from Virginia rapper McKinley Dixon, a growing name who deserves to grow some more. An artist who is able to balance social conscience, personal anecdote, and symbolic storytelling with aplomb. Dixon's previous 2 albums both can lay claim to being among the best of the decade, and Magic Alive might even manage to outshine them. At the core of the narrative here is a simple concept. 3 kids commemorating a dead friend. But the memorials and monuments they build are mirrored in how the record seems to have a crude and almost unwieldy mass of different musical elements, a magpie-like fascination with jazz and soul and funk, and beautiful shiny morsels of space rock and lo-fi, and whatever else takes his and his many skilled collaborators' fancy. It's full to bursting in sound, fuller with bridges between the album's story, its purveyor's real-life stories, and the story of Black America, and its ambition and heart make it both a joy and a treasure to experience.
Right. And I will always love you.
Told you she'd be back. If perverts left you worried that the old Ethel Cain couldn't come to the phone right now, don't worry, she's on speed dial here. Another narrative album, Willoughby Tucker serves as a prequel to Preacher's Daughter, and details an unfulfilled romance between Ethel, the central character of these albums, mind, a persona for the musician known as Hayden Anhedonia, and her titular crush Willoughby, a sensitive boy who is unable both to rescue her from her own misery and to live up to the platonic ideal Cain has constructed of him in her head. Angsty, adolescent, and atmospheric, soaking in slowcore and Americana, Willoughby Tucker helps flesh out the characters and world of Preacher's Daughter into a fully lived-in saga, retroactively detailing the characterization of Cain and giving the character's narrative nuance and heft. The angry, unfortunate love triangle, the fantasies of death and decay, the emotional stagnation and miscommunications are the stuff of any great Bildungsroman, and when seen in tandem with Preacher's Daughter, it's no overstatement to suggest that Cain's story is the closest musical equivalent we have to the great American novel. Wherever she, be it Ethel or Hayden, goes next, I'll be sure to follow.
Where's your phone? Why aren't you filming this?
If those 2 names mean anything to you already, you can get a sense of just how heavy a punch this project can land. A combined effort of metal supergroup Sumac and American performance poet, musician, and activist Moormother, the film lays a heady mix of Afrofuturist aspiration and the all-too-sobering frequent realities of social and cultural disenfranchisement over a sludgy, grating underscore to sometimes almost nauseating ends. It's always remarkable to me when an album can pull off being both extremely pared back and yet also unmoving in its strength, sturdiness, and impact, and the film is one of the best examples of this I've heard in a good while. Individually, the textures are sparse, unmistakable individual layers that sit disparately in the mix, but each one is so substantive on its own, so distinct in its identity, that the sum of them all stacked one on top of the other manages to give the illusion of a tightly packed, dense, nay, impenetrable wall of sound. Sumac's work here tends even more droning and doomy, Moormother's prose poetry even more rhythmicized and ragged and refrain-heavy to match. But occasionally the clouds do part for glimpses of something truly ethereal, the choral harmonies that shine through in Scene 4, the soft and sorrowful instrumental postlude that closes the album, and it's in those moments that the raw power of the heavier moments can truly set in.
Put the axe down now! Go to hell! Shoot him! Put it down! Fuck you! Kill him! Kill him! Kill him! Kill them all! Let God sort them out!
Let God sort him out indeed. Now, what with the recent allegations leveled against Pusha T, this will be a far less effusive chunk of the list than I had originally envisioned, and I won't lie and pretend that it's not been difficult to dip into this album again over the past few months. I had half a mind to skip over it entirely for the video, but that felt like a more disingenuous move than anything. Let God Sort Him Out was undeniably a huge part of my listening last year, and my thoughts on the quality of the project haven't really changed. The album is still very, very good. The Clips team, not just the duo, but Pharrell as well, returning with as much punch as before, but adding a more reflective and at times vulnerable edge to their lyricism, exemplified by the stunning opener The Birds Don't Sing. The features are judiciously picked too, with some of the best the contemporary rap game has to offer showing up and complementing Malice and Pusha brilliantly. There's not a dull track on this album, there's not even a bad beat. It just sucks that this doesn't feel like the triumphant return it started out as anymore. Long an essential, if at times pretty inaccessible, cornerstone of the alternative rock scene, Deerhoof remain a fascinating artist to follow. Deeply principled regarding their shows, their audiences, and their distribution, this is, to my knowledge, the only record on this list removed from Spotify for ethical reasons, with the band citing Spotify CEO Daniel Ek's funding of an AI weapons firm. It might seem like empty posturing, but the band have never been shy about their politics or their worldview, and it's a core part of what makes their latest release, Noble and Godlike in Ruin, so compelling. After 2023's comparatively coolly received Miracle Level, their first studio production and their first record entirely in vocalist Satomi Matsuzaki's native Japanese, they return to a more conceptual and blatantly political foundation for album 20, and it leaves them newly energized. The conception of a Frankenstein record in meaning and in sound is central here. The title itself comes from Shelley's novel, and the cover art is a cut-and-paste collage of the band's faces, but so too is the highlighting and identification with the oppressed, the disenfranchised, the subjugated. The nature motifs in the words and music tie into both sides of this concept brilliantly, both a shunning of the cruelties and rigidities of society and a damning double entendre on the dehumanization of so many marginalized groups. It's not a hand-holder. The beauty to be found in this album will be rent from you in a torrent of noise and jarring angularity at a moment's notice, but it's engaged, enraged, and rousing stuff. This may be the first release from Racing Mount Pleasant, another Geese opener, FYI. But the first release from the band now called Racing Mount Pleasant, it is not. Debuting as Kingfisher with 2022's also fantastic Grip Your Fist I'm Heavenbound, the band later changed their name and now usher in the rebrand with an ingeniously composed and bittersweet concept album of the ups and downs, the durings and the afters of a relationship. Some of the songs here predate even the name change, withheld from the Kingfisher record basically on account of just not getting recorded yet, and the band's own history is a foundational influence for the record. But it's that romantic through line that forms the backbone of the album, and it's a deeply felt and versatile one. The overarching structure is cleverly designed with this kind of chiastic mirror image effect. You and You Part 2 form the center point of the album, with Your New Place and Your Old Place respectively bookending the tracklist with both thematic and musical callbacks. In between, we vacillate between two discrete points in this relationship explored here, a morning waking up together in bed and a post-breakup visit. And the hinterland navigated through these discrete but naturally connected moments is often difficult and self-contradictory in an emotionally resonant, relatable way. It's tempting to compare this album, like several others on the list, to the work of Black Country New Road, for example. And sure, similarities are there, both lyrically and compositionally, but RMP's broad strokes, lush, folksy chamber prog channels other influences too. Think Bon Iver or Lord Huron, even bits of Father John Misty, Phil Elverum, American Football. It's a confident reinvention and a remarkable work of both great scale and deeply tender intimacy.
Are you aware, my dear, of the seriousness of what you're saying?
Yes, help me, Father.
Come on now, Anna. Starting this album with a track called The Beast isn't going to help those satanic panic allegations. I envy you, if this will be your first time with an Anna von Hauswolf record. She is an artist whose work can inspire an almost unhealthy level of fascination, and I've been knee-deep in it for years now. Perhaps most known for her neoclassical darkwave sound, keening voice, and love and mastery of the pipe organ, Van Halswolf's music is gargantuan in scale, both gothic and radiant in tone, and truly and utterly singular, helped by just how much the Swedish artist commits vocally and spiritually to realizing her aesthetic. The classic sound of hers is perhaps best encapsulated in 2018's breathtaking Dead Magic, but on Iconoclasts she finds a way to reconcile it with pop and rock sensibility without losing an ounce of her latent appeal. Ethel Cain and Iggy Pop are among the features here if you needed any concrete proof that there's a more outwardly mainstream bent to what AVH is trying to do here. But don't worry, this is still as gut-punchingly ominous and instrumentally affronting as anything from her catalogue, with more of that lustrous pipe organ, Otis Sancho's caterwauling Colin Stetson-esque saxophone — God, I love a saxophone! — thundering drums, gritty bass, and sumptuous strings all finding themselves as much at the fore as anything Van Halswolf's penetrating soprano lets soar out. It's a potent, poetic, and piercing art-pop powerhouse, and proof of Halswolf's unmatched command of both atmosphere and aesthetic.
How about 800?
Others have offered thousands, and I tell them all the same. No. This doll in particular has been through too much. It's carried over 100 years of racism in its small, delicate frame.
Another album that I fully will not be saying the title of, but if I think back to which listening experience was the most memorable of last year, my first go through Billy Woods' horrorcore opus from 2025 was certainly up there. This breaks through the usual discomfort of many a typical horrorcore record, most of which usually rely too much on visceral images or almost cartoonish musical illusions that can be left at the door once you're gone. Woods' work here, on the other hand, is dark and disturbing and genuinely disquieting in a way that maybe only he can truly pull together, be it the weeping, the constant smog in the background of the mix, the more familiar but expertly executed audio cues of music boxes and distortion and low ambient drones. What he's able to coax out of his producing collaborators is nothing short of visionarily despondent. And what with its incredibly loaded title, we're clearly returning here to some of the same themes as 2022's equally phenomenal Ethiops, though this time dressed up in a more brutally pessimistic overall package. The tropes and truths of black horror, both in fiction and in real life, are ample enough ground for a compelling record on their own, but with the vision realized so completely through both text and sound, Woods makes it an unforgettable, urgent concept around which to build this incredible album.
I'm gonna be about $400. Just give me your pen and the paper, cause I'm asked what the what? What a money reside, what a money reside, what a money reside, what a money reside. Okay, I told y'all before, y'all know what I do. I give all these good deals and everything else. Y'all better ask about me because I do all that all the time. And that's on who? Mary Had a Little Lamb. Okay?
If I had a nickel for every Chilean post-rock 70-plus minute album from a Santiago-based band with a prominent saxophone that made it into my top 100, well, you get the picture. And while Candelabro's second album, translated as Desire, Flesh and Will, does have some windmillisms to it, like Hesse Castle, I won't force the point too much, least of all because that would imply a retreading of La Brea's boards that I don't think is super fair. At a certain point, sax arpeggios over strongly energetic progressive chamber rock will just make my mind go there, you know? But Candelabro's net is cast wider, drawing concrete influences from 60s-style art rock and 50s chamber jazz alongside their more contemporary post and chamber rock traits, and the overall result is a far lighter listen, even as the spiritually and nationally charged lyrics can sometimes land with some rather surreal and carnal imagery. It is a Christian album in corners, and I know the idea of that can fill some people with dread. Let's be real, a lot of explicitly spiritual popular music can suck, no matter which creed it extols. But Deseo, Carne y Voluntad gets away with it for a couple of reasons. One, faith and the spiritual is just one of several substantive themes that are woven through this album, and even at its most explicitly adulatory, such as on Angel, it is framed as something personal and precious, autobiography for the artists rather than preaching to the crowd. Second of all, the music is just really good, frequently even sublime, and such top-rate tunes provide an alternative mode of enjoyment if the text doesn't resonate with you. I don't know what's up with the Chilean rock scene at the moment, but I want it to keep happening if this is the kind of incredible work it's giving us.
Oi, Go. Aye, more passion, more passion, more passion, more energy, more energy, more footwork, more footwork, more footwork, more passion.
Oh, we're hitting pure vibes on this one. Nourished by Time is one of those obscure famous artists, beloved by critics and online music circles and in desperate need of some wider public appreciation, and The Passionate One serves as good an introduction as any. Self-produced as with all his work, Marcus Elliott Brown is a master of creating warm, inviting, and slightly woozy beds of sound, decorating retro R&B foundations with bright synths, bedroom pop fuzz, soulful harmonic progressions, and the kinds of beats that wouldn't feel out of place on a new Jack Swing record. His penmanship here is tackling some big ideas, cutting through the bullshit and heaping on the badinage, keenly astute in both its social and its psychological insight. But nothing is spared from the scope here. Warmongery, late-stage capitalism, police brutality, digital isolation, but also the pains of addiction and heartbreak and the anxieties of fame and artistry. And it boils down to this key question of passion and drive. Who's responsible for your passion? What can you sacrifice to see your dreams through? And is the individual goal worth it at the expense of everything around you? It's a thorny topic that Brown explores on multiple diverse levels over some of the smoothest beats and instrumentals you'll hear on this whole list. It's a perfect mix of thinker and feeler, and Brown's best yet. Crazy to think, looking back, that I wasn't super sold with Bad Bunny's last few albums. Like, don't get me wrong, I love the guy, and he never fails to deliver a good time. But I hadn't really truly loved a project of his since YHLQMDLG back in 2020. And sure, listening back now to the three in between, there's a lot to love and appreciate there too, but if anything, DTMF only justified my feelings further, because this thing fucking slaps. Man, is this a fun album to just bop to, a bold and heartfelt and ambitious project in a way that maybe the zeitgeist wasn't calling for before. But now, with authenticity and self-expression feeling as much an act of protest as an act of love, Bunny's unapologetically gleeful blend of reggaeton, Latin dance styles, Puerto Rico's own música jibara, and electronic pop feels so essential, and he realizes it so surely. This whole album feels like one spinning celebration of culture and heritage that manages to speak directly and defiantly to the heart of its community, past, present, and future, while never leaving anyone who actually wants to come in for the party out in the cold. These might sound like big words and lofty sentiments for what is to a lot of people just a solid good time, but I can't help it. Maybe the spirit of the Super Bowl halftime show is still living on in me, but I just can't get over how giddy this entire project makes me feel.
So right now I'm going to go sing opera. Here it goes.
What to say about Lux at this point, huh? Like, just truly a monumental achievement from pop's first lady of flamenco, as she jumps headfirst into a hagiographical blend of classical, electronica, and pop that would risk appearing pretentious or overblown in the hands of a less secure star. And sure, okay, Lux does rely to a certain degree on excess and spectacle. The opening of Berghain smacks as much of Carl Jenkins' Palladio as it does any true operatic overture. The polyglottism on show is a little shaky in corners, and the quasi-symphonic four-movement structure is perhaps slightly lost when then broken up further into conveniently streamable 2 to 5 minute tracks. But for all of that to hold true and yet still leave the album feeling this important and spectacular, this lush and ambitious and truly special, is a testament to the quality of the work on Lux from Rosalia and from her collaborators. We know she's not a stranger to a concept album. El Mal Querer is a more narrative example from her discography and is indisputably the album that first made her famous. But much like with Miley, though arguably to a greater extent, the scope and dedication she displays to her concept and the strength of the musical and lyrical material to back it up are commendable, transcendent, awe-striking. Visionary pop from a visionary pop star.
All right, so here's the cinnamon. All right? All right, here you go.
Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Billy Woods lent more explicitly into horrorcore and freaked the fuck out of me in the process of the opposite movement from Backwash, the Zambian-Canadian rapper-producer behind some of the best and most consistently probing horrorcore of the past decade. But here, for full-length 5, Ashanti Mutinta drops some of the more overt genre overtones in her work for a more abstractly expressive, maybe surprisingly beautiful act of reckoning. Self-written and self-produced, Backwash's latest is an arresting and naughty piece of work that takes aim both inwardly and outwardly with nuclear rage and microscopic precision. Notions of addiction, mental disquiet, self-directed hatred, and personal pain are sent into mutual orbit with fierce and uncompromising condemnations of war, corruption, the Gaza genocide, and the cruelty of so many in the world, to others and to themselves. The push and pull between the transcendently beauteous and the harrowingly bleak is pushed further than ever before in Mutinta's music, as the material being stitched together pulls as much from electronica, prog rock, avant rap, and pop rap as from anything horrified and hardcore. A breath of fresh air it may not be, but the scream it lets out is one for the ages.
Meow. Oh!
Leeds-based undercover jazz rapper Louse the Cat is a semi-permanent fixture within the city's independent music scene, showing up and disappearing at whim and maintaining an air of mystique about himself. And now our self-appointed Prince of Bins has returned to the studio for the first time since 2018's The Girl, the Cat and the Tree to expand upon his personal mythos while delivering one of the most carnivalesque, fantastical, imaginative hip-hop projects in years. The Mocking Stars is part nursery rhyme, part cautionary tale, part dreamscape, part self-effacing allegory that follows our feline protagonist through the highs and lows of hubris, addiction, misanthropy, and escapism. The delivery is melodic, mellifluous, and melancholic, the production and instrumentals pulling freely from jazz, theatre music, UK hip-hop, and symphonic soul, as our cast of characters corral the cat through his self-loathing, exposing the hypocrisies and empty aspirations that cloud his everyday. It's a unique approach to relatable themes that proves in its execution to pay off in a big way. The Mocking Stars might just be the best, certainly the most theatrical concept album of the decade so far.
Every outburst is Donald wanting to protect his family. He loves you so much the thought of anything bad happening to you infuriates him!
Well, I think this wins the award for the most concisely apt name of an album this year. Polish power prog outfit Ciśnienie deliver a blistering, almost overwhelming dose of noisy, aggressive, wrought-out jazz avant prog metal experimental totalism noise rock. It's honestly a bit hard to talk about, so ruthlessly heavy and electric this roiling mass of sound proves to be. Recorded live in studio with an audience watching and very noticeably present in corners, the 4 tracks that make up Angry Noises may be apparently monolithic from the outside, but the construction at work inside them is no less thought through than any other good musical monadnock. The pacing of this foursome is remarkable, given that the shortest of these tracks is still nearly 8 minutes long. There are classical interpolations buried within the fabric of the opener from Stravinsky and Holst. The virtuosity, endurance, power, and pure athleticism on display from the musicians is nothing short of remarkable, as each member of the band gets their moments through the runtime to take center stage and absolutely fucking shred. It's a listening experience that leaves you breathless, sweaty, and exhilarated come the end. But there are worse ways to spend an evening, believe you me. Right, I've compared enough other bands to them at this point. I should probably talk about BCNR themselves too. Much has been said, and will continue to be said, about the departure of Isaac Wood from Black Country New Road all of 4 days before the release of their second album, Ants From Up There. It was a rather shocking and big shift for what had quickly become one of the foremost bands of the British indie scene, co-poster children of the windmill sound along with Black Midi. But 3 years on, and after an already accomplished set of songs from their Bush Hall gig, the now 6-strong BCNR have proven even more surely that their artistic identity, and indeed their success, are not beholden solely to their former frontman. With the three women of the group, May, Tyler, and Georgia, taking over primary songwriting and vocal responsibilities here, and the group diversifying to include instruments like harpsichords, mandolins, and an entire BCNR's worth of recorders, the band's sound opens up to incorporate baroque pop, prog, and folk to sometimes almost epic ends, maintaining a slightly dark and sardonic edge to their lyricism, but pushing it as much into the mystical as the mundane. And Two Horses, man, that's fully just my favourite song of 2025, a baroque pop western murder ballad of remarkable craft and lyrical violence that honestly is quite unlike any other song. It's a true revelation to see this sextet open up their work like this, allowing the second era of the band its own distinct identity, and it's all the more brilliant for it. I jumped onto the Jim Legacy bandwagon back in 2023 with another album whose full title I'm not going to say. I was instantly taken in with the sample-rich, nostalgic take on Afrobeats, alt R&B, and drill, but really using genre tags for an album like HNPM is kind of pointless, and that's the point. Fast forward 2 years and Black British Music 2025 shows up and I'm right back there again, dragged by my oh-so-willing ankles through sounds and styles that have no business sounding this good next to each other on a single project. It never reaches quite as far as something like the Side Pieces record from earlier in the list, nor does it try to cram as much into every moment. A Jim Legacy song isn't meant to do that. They're concise, precise in capturing a specific atmosphere, a style or a single combination of styles that tap as much into a cultural meaning as they do underscore the lyrical meaning of the track. Because with a title like Black British Music 2025, Legacy is doing more than just releasing an album, he's positing something of a musical model for a genre and a cultural space. Think Charlie XCX boldly proclaiming that she's devised Pop 2 as the sequel to pop music back in 2017. Here Legacy is cataloguing a slice through the diversity of Britain's black musical culture and heritage as it currently stands, and offering a cohesive, if sprawling vision of what it can look like condensed into a single project. It's bold, it's ambitious, but he clearly has the talent and vision to pull it off, and the results are kaleidoscopic, engrossing, and incredibly accomplished all around. Yeah, alright, I'm not original. If you were keeping track through this video, you probably had guessed this would be number one. Crazy, really, that an album as nutty as this is a fairly undisputed major player of the year. I mean, look at the general reception of Geese's SNL performance. No matter what music Twitter tells you, these guys are not normie friendly. And yet, there's a lot to love about Geese, and a lot to love about getting killed. Wait.
Gun.
As a follow-up to 3D Country from a couple years back, it's more abrasive yet more focused, and while it's less outwardly experimental, it's perhaps more oddly composed. And yet, at its core, it's still remarkably good songcraft and some of the best and most characterful lyric writing you'll find in the entire decade, helped by my favourite Kenny Beats production since Vince Staples' Ramona Park back in 2022. For every crash-out screamfest like in Trinidad, you have genuine beauty in the likes of Opé the Cocaine. The tender emotion of Half Real to contrast with the weary defiance of Taxes, the kinetic joy of the outro to Cobra to the slinky jam band pessimism of the outro of the title track. And by scaling back the thematic apocalypse at hand just a smidge from 3D Country, focusing more on personal reflections of just having everything kind of going a bit to shit and striving to come out the other side, we get a better glimpse at the emotional core we already got acquainted with in Winter's solo album from late 2024. And to have it all end with that rollicking, triumphant finale in Long Island City, Here I Come. Pure kinetic energy to cap off the best album of 2025. Well, there we go. 150 albums that I can't help but think are pretty neat. As said at the head of the video, if you want to take a peek at the full 300, they'll be on my Album of the Year and my Rate Your Music, whichever platform you so prefer. I'd love to know your thoughts on the music on this list, which records you didn't know, which records you think I'm gassing up too much, which records I clearly must have missed, so on and so forth. And if you liked the video, why not like and subscribe?
Oh, baby, no!
I'm planning on really diving into some of the music, movies, and media that I adore on this channel, and it'd be great to see you again. Hey, I'll even save a seat just for you. Anyway, till the next video, bye-bye.